the reply will be before the Departmental Committee on Trade, Industry and Cooperatives. And finally, the member for South Imenti constituency, Honorable Kathuri Murungi, will ask the Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture and Livestock about the task force formed on tea and coffee, whether or not they concluded their mandate and prepared their reports 3 years ago. That is, the Cabinet Secretary aware that that particular task force concluded its mandate and prepared its report 3 years ago, and if aware, what is the implementation status of the said reports? This particular question will be answered before the Departmental Committee on Agriculture and Livestock. If you are just joining us, these are live pictures from the National Assembly chambers where business is about to begin. This broadcast is brought to you by the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit in conjunction with the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. My name is Edward Kabasa. Good morning.
Let us pray. Almighty God, who in your wisdom and goodness have appointed the officers of leaders at parliaments for the welfare of society and the just government of the people, we beseech you to behold with your abundant favor us, your servants, whom you have been pleased to call to the performance of important trusts in this republic. Let your blessings descend upon us here assembled, and grant that we treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote your honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country and of those whose interests you have committed to our charge. Amen. I'll direct that we ring the bell for 10 minutes.
Take a look at some of the businesses that the House is going to be transacting this morning. Straight up will be a procedural motion on the exemption of business from the provisions of Standing Order 40, subsection 3, and that particular business concerns the report of the audited financial statements for the Political Parties Fund for the year ended June 2017. The members will be looking to debate on this particular report by the Special Funds Account Committee on Audited Financial Statements for Political Parties Fund for the year ended June 2017. The report of the Auditor General on the financial statements of Political Parties Fund for the year ended June 2017 was tabled in the House on March 13th, 2018 and committed to Special Funds Accounts Committee. Examination of audited accounts of Political Parties Fund is amongst the mandate of the committee as provided under the National Assembly. Quorum has been achieved.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair. Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions. Order number 5, papers.
Leader of Majority? Leader of Majority? Honorable members, order. Order. The Honorable Sankok. The Leader of Majority? No. Oh, very well. The whip of Majority Party.
Correct.
You are taking this one. Very well.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Leader of Majority, I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the House today, Wednesday, November 7th, 2018, morning sitting. A, the reports of the Auditor General and financial statements in respect of the following institutions for the year ended 30th June 2017 and certificates therein. 1, Kenya Electricity Generating Company, PLC. 2, State Officers House Mortgage Scheme Fund. 3, Commission for University Education. 4, Civil Servants Housing Scheme Fund. 5, National Drought Management Authority. 6, Karatina University. And 7, Laikipia University. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. Honorable Ashali. What is out of what? That is a member for? The Honorable Baraza. Yes, I was not seeing you clearly. My eye was, you have...
the Speaker,
yes.
Sorry for interrupting the Majority Whip, but I just want to bring to attention that yesterday the Honorable Sangok, who was wearing like a clerk, now is wearing like a cook. Surely this House is not a place where you dress the way you want to dress. The Speaker, you really want to, because if this is going to continue, then it means by tomorrow we will be coming here dressed in the manner that we want, Mr. Speaker. This is not... like
the Honorable Barasa. The Honorable Barasa, even before the Honorable Mbadi speaks to this, I think the Honorable Sankoki is smartly dressed. He's not. The Honorable Mbadi, what did you want to say?
No, Mr. Speaker, I don't really mind about anyone dressing like a cook or a chef, because those are really noble professions. It's a very noble profession to be a cook. But my concern, Mr. Speaker, one time I walked into Parliament precincts, not even the chamber, and I was wearing an orange shirt with nothing written on it. But I had a difficult time with our orderlies, insisting that that is a party's color and that I cannot come with such a color in Parliament. And Mr. Speaker, today I need to clarification the kind of color, because I know some people may say that that's a national flag, but we know that one party, Mama na Baba, KANU, has over the years monopolized this kind of coloring, and therefore it is easily associated with that political party. So, Mr. Speaker, if I could be denied an opportunity to access Parliament precincts on an orange shirt, then equally, the color which is associated with Mama na Baba, you cannot allow an honorable member to walk into the chamber in colors of Mama na Baba, unless now he comes out clearly to disown that that color means something else. Thank you.
The Honorable Leader of Majority.
Number one, I want to confirm that Honorable Sankok is not a member of KANU. That's a small party. He's a member of Jubilee with the 175 MPs. So he has never been, and he will never be, a member of KANU. So if he's wearing KANU colors, that is not Sankok, that is somebody else. You can only wear Jubilee colors. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, Honorable Sankok is a very unique member. And by his uniqueness, his attire has been unique since he joined Parliament, from the day he was sworn in. So I think, Honorable Sankok, even Kenyans across, even in my constituency, When they see this kind of colors, they know it's Honorable Sankok. So you cannot compare Honorable Sankok to what happened yesterday. And he's a serious leader of Jubilee. And Honorable Mbandi must withdraw the statement imputing that Sankok is a member of KANU. And Honorable Baraza must withdraw that Honorable Sankok is a cook. Cooks are very, very important. They cook for us even here in Parliament. So let us not demean the profession or those Kenyans who do cooking. In fact, the better word is chef. That's a more decent word. They are no longer called cooks, they are called chefs. And even, you know, at our homes, we have got very unique Kenyans who prepare meals for us. So let us not demean. And Honorable Sankok is a unique member with a unique color. The only problem I had with Honorable Sankok is sometimes he wears uniform close to the clerk. So you confuse whether he's a part of the clerks of the House or he's a member of Parliament. But I think that the Speaker has also made a communication.
The Honorable Danita Gatti. The Honorable Danita Gatti.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for the opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I think, Mr. Speaker, what Honorable Sankok is trying to tell members, and Mr. Speaker, let me just use this opportunity to simply tell members that this month of November is actually our month. For members who do not know, this November is actually Disability Awareness Month. And I think when he comes strongly like that, he's trying to also promote the issue, the fact that members need to take the issue of disability so far away. Mr. Speaker, I don't see any, in terms of dressing, I really have no, there I will support him, Mr. Speaker, so that we're also trying to amplify our voice in this House. And Mr. Speaker, we will continue seeing that this November, because this is our month, Mr. Speaker, unless we come out like that. And you can see, Mr. Speaker, how I'm dressed. This is now, you know, this kind of dressing, Mr. Speaker, is amplifying the month that now people with disabilities in this country need to be heard. And you'll be seeing my colleague, Honorable Sankok, on the other side, Danita Gatti on this side, Mr. Speaker, so that we are able to. So it should not really be a bother.
Very well, the Honorable Danita. Finally, the Honorable Sankok.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. I'm shocked because I've been connected to a very small party while I belong to a very huge party, the hugest party in Africa. And today, for me, I came, the largest party, that is it. And it is large, it is huge. I came here today dressed in white. And you know, white represent peace. And since there have been a lot of peace in this country after the handshake, and after also Baba being promoted to the leader of infrastructure in Africa. And you know, Honorable Speaker, I once was an untrained teacher, and any child who used to come late to school, I used to promote him to a bell ringer so that he can come and ring the bell so that he cannot come late. Any noisemaker, I promote him to be a prefect, so that he can be writing the noisemaker, so that he can keep quiet. Honorable Speaker, you see now after the promotion of Baba, whom we respect very much, he have been actually telling Kenyans to keep quiet, to shut up, to pay VAT 8%. Unlike the other day, if it was normal days, he would have been the one sitting on the tarmac, accompanied by his professional running mate. So, Honorable Speaker, today I'm just here to actually tell Kenyans that we need to continue with peace. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker.
Very well. Very well. Honorable members, the Honorable Pukose, there's nothing out of order. The Honorable Kaluma resume your seat. The Honorable Kaluma, you cannot force the Speaker to see you when he has chosen not to see you. The Honorable Kaluma, the Honorable Kaluma, the Honorable Kaluma, resume your seat. Honorable members, so that we may make progress, these are the directions that I will give on this issue. The Honorable Sankok is properly dressed except for the hat. Only the hat. Otherwise, he is properly dressed and is very smart. The Honorable Sankok, even the one that we have put on is even worse. It's even worse. You know the kind of hats that will be permitted in this house. So now the Honorable Sankok is properly and is properly within the house. The Honorable Kaluma, what was the burning issue that you seem to want to?
Yeah, I thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the matter in terms of how we dress to be in this house is not a light matter. And Mr. Speaker, my concern is that each time this matter has come up, the House is treating it as a light thing. Mr. Speaker, I've seen members of Parliament coming into this House in black jeans trousers. If we continue this way, Mr. Speaker, I fear we would not be distinguished from people who are transacting businesses other than what we are transacting here. Mr. Speaker, this is the reason as to why in the standing order, we have prescribed how we should dress. I fear we are lowering standards and soon we'll be mistaken for an institution other than Parliament when we transact business. So Mr. Speaker, in as much as we are saying Honorable Sankok is now properly dressed, I think there is a good reason as to why the standing orders define, and we are not talking about colors. You can wear any colors, but really how the clothes or the attire you put on into this house, looks like must be, definite and must be defined by what is in the standing orders. I'm fearing we may take it lightly. The majority leader said yesterday that people will be coming here in council. If we are not careful, that is the direction we are going. And more so the female members, Mr. Speaker. How they dress nowadays, you are bothered about where they are going. I don't know where they are going. They are distracting us. It is something, Mr. Speaker, I would request we take firmly in as much as we don't want to, be overbearing over how members present themselves. All members, we must insist, must keep to the standing orders. We don't dress this way because we love.
Well spoken, the Honorable Kaluma, and knowing where you come from, I think we all know why decorum is important. It also passes a message of what the House wants to do. And Honorable Kaluma, being from the legal profession, knows what sartorial elegance is about and what it speaks to. So I think members, you should take note of what the Honorable Kaluma has spoken to, and I think that is the position of the House, that we should dress in a manner that is likely, that is supposed to bring honor to the House. So that is well done. We shall then make progress. What is out of order, the Honorable Gikaria? Is that you? The Honorable Gikaria, are you the one who still... The Honorable Gikaria.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to raise this point of order. As Honorable Kaluma is raising matters to do with the way our brother is dressed, Honorable Sankok, is Honorable Kaluma in order to sit where he's seated when he's supposed to be seated on the other side? What is he doing on this other side?
The Honorable Gikaria, you are out of order. The Honorable Gikaria, you are out of order. We shall make progress.
Can you explain why he's seated here?
Order number 6, notices of motion. Order number 6 and statements.
The Honorable Danita Gatti. The first question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, my question goes to the Cabinet Secretary for Labor and Social Protection. And the question is, Mr. Speaker, when will the National Council for Persons with Disabilities, NCPWD, board be gazetted? I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The next question is by the Honorable John Namburu. The first question by the Honorable Danita Gatti will be replied to by the department before the Departmental Committee on Labor and Social Welfare. The second one is by the Honorable John Namburu.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. My first question also goes to the Labor and Social Protection Cabinet Secretary. The government designed this money, 2,500, for the elderly. Mr. Speaker, sir, this leader.
The honorable member for Larry, just ask the question as it is in the order paper.
When will the government remit all the pending 500 shillings that is given to the elderly so that the National Hospital Insurance Fund can get their money? Because these people, the elderly, are going to the hospitals.
The Honorable John Namburu.
Yes,
do you have the order paper with you?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, sir. When will the government remit the pending Kenya shillings 500 of the Kenya shillings 2,000 monthly stipend under the Old Persons Cash Transfer Program to the National Hospital Insurance Fund for their medical cover? B, when will these remittances be updated to enable the beneficiaries access necessary medical treatment and medications?
Very well, the Honorable John Namburu. That question will be replied to before the Departmental Committee on Labor and Social Welfare.
The second question.
The leader of, the chief whip of the majority party, the Honorable John Namburu, just hold on. Just hold on. I'll give you the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think it's important that we guide members on how to ask questions because this session is a session that is new, and some members may not have the benefit of knowing what exactly needs to happen. Mr. Speaker, there is the aspect of Hansard, which also needs to be taken care of when a member is asking questions. Like, for example, just the most immediate former member who asked the question, he never cited the number of the question he is asking. And yet, it is very important because the Hansard will not be able to capture the number of the question. My wish would have been that you started with a number, like for in this case, you should have started with number 127 of 2018, because this is the number of this question. And it's important that it's captured in the Hansard in that manner. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Mashali, that is a proper clarification. And having come from where the Venerable Honorable Shikuku came from, who was a stickler for the rules, I think it runs in the blood of the people who come from that area. The Honorable Mburu, I think those clarifications are correct. When you posit this question, then you must also pronounce yourself on the number of that question for proper capturing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also thank Mr. Asheli. You know, we fellowship in the same church, and he's my whip, so he has to guide. The second question is question number 128/2018. Is the Cabinet Secretary aware that monkeys have been invading parts of Kijabe, Korio, and Machani areas in Lari constituency? What measure is the ministry putting in place to deal with this menace? Because there are so many monkeys, over 5,000.
Very well.
Thank you.
Very well. That question will be replied before the Departmental Committee on Environment and Natural Resources. The next one is question number 133 of 2018, and this is by the Honorable Fabian Muli, member for Kangundo constituency.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I'd like to bring the question number 133 of 2018 to the Cabinet Secretary for Industry, Trade and Cooperatives. Is the Cabinet Secretary satisfied with the quality and standards of petroleum and the petroleum product in the market, and the pump machine dispensers and the meters in the fuel stations? B, how often is the inspection of petroleum products, petroleum pumps, machines, fuel dispensers, and petroleum meters conducted to calm tampering and ensure that approved specifications and standards are maintained? C, what action is the ministry taking against individuals and companies found to carrying out alteration of petroleum products and tampering with fuel pumps, dispensers, and meters? Thank you.
Very well. That question will be replied before the Departmental Committee on Trade, Industry, and Cooperatives. The next one is question number 138 of 2018, and this will be...
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. My question number 138 of 2018 is directed to the Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture and Livestock. Is the Cabinet Secretary aware that the task forces formed on tea and coffee concluded their mandates and prepared their reports 3 years ago? And if aware, what is the implementation status of the said reports? Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Very well. That question will be replied before the Departmental Committee on Agriculture and Livestock. Next business.
Order number 8, procedural motion. Exemption of business from the provisions of Standing Order 43.
Chief Whip, Majority.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that this House orders that the business appearing as order number 11 in the order paper be exempted from the provisions of Standing Order number 40, sub-article 3, being a Wednesday morning, a day allocated for business not sponsored by the majority or a minority party, or business sponsored by a committee. Mr. Speaker, I just want to remind members what Standing Order number 43 demands, so that they are up to speed, they understand exactly what we are doing as a House under this procedural motion. The Standing Order number 43 reads that on Wednesday morning, a bill or a motion not, actually we need to note the word not, sponsored by the majority or minority party or by a committee shall have precedence over other business in such an order as the House Business Committee shall ballot. Mr. Speaker, as a House, because of the short recess we had, we have a backlog for business sponsored by committees, and I want to be specific. Our committee appearing under order number 11, our committee of special funds, led by Chair Honorable Kathuri, who had quite a number of reports, Mr. Speaker. And just before we went on recess, he had brought a report for constituencies of Nairobi County, which were debated and closed. And by that time, he had quite a number of other reports that he wanted to bring. And I think it is upon us as a House to allow Honorable Kathuri and his committee to bring as many reports as possible, because this is actually touching on our constituencies, and that's why we allowed order number 11 to be brought in, even though this is meant to be a private member's motion. Mr. Speaker, I just also want to take this opportunity to request members and encourage them to bring as many motions as possible. Because, Mr. Speaker, I am aware that with the introduction of questions, this has reduced the interest that members have had over introduction of motions. And also, members have also an opportunity to also bring petitions. But I want to just remind members that for the business of this House, it's only motions that would involve members, because questions will start with the committee and end with the cabinet secretary in charge of that ministry answering those questions. The petitions will start with the committees and end with a report that will be tabled here without being debated. But it's only motions that other members will have an opportunity to debate. Therefore, I'm just requesting that as we ask questions and as we bring petitions, we just also want to encourage you to continue bringing motions so that members can also have an opportunity to solve a problem that you may actually be solving through either questions or through petitions. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move and request Honorable Chris Wamalwa to second. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Chris Wamalwa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to second the procedural motion as moved by Honorable Ashali. Ordinarily, we know very well on every Wednesday morning, as per standing orders, business is made for the private members. But for today, when you look at the order number 11, it is actually touching on committee work. And I want to thank Honorable Kaduri, the chair of the Special Funds Accounts Committee, for the good work that you're doing, because so far you've tabled quite a number of reports and forms this part of the business of this House. I really want to thank you. And particularly when it comes to matters of private members, as Honorable Shali has clearly put it, the core business of Parliament is to legislate. I know questions have come. You don't need to do any research. It's very straightforward. And as he clearly puts it, it's focusing more on oversight. But for us to remain relevant, as far as legislation is concerned, honorable members should come up with motions. They should also come up with bills, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, again, we look at the technical team, because some of us proposed bills more than 7 months ago. We've not seen them even come into the second reading. So we are looking at the legal department. They're actually sleeping on the job. They are taking too long to process some of the bills. And you find this thing is causing members of Parliament to get demoralized. And yes, and the budget committee. So this is the time you should crack the whip. The budget committee is sleeping on the job as far as processing of bills is concerned. And even the legal committee, the technical legal side of Parliament, because they are sleeping on the job. Bills come, they stay forever, you don't see them, and you can see members are getting demoralized. Now they are moving towards questions, because questions and petitions are processed faster. So actually it's not just an issue of members of Parliament. This is the time the technical team give them a warning, and also the budget committee, so that for purposes of money bills and all that. Otherwise, we second, and on the issue of the CDF, or on the issue of the political parties fund, Mr. Speaker, I know very well since the new constitution, it is very clear that 0.3% of the national revenue should go to political parties. But it's very unfortunate Treasury has never done this, Mr. Speaker. So it is actually very important, it's very urgent. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I second.
Very well, the Honorable Chris Wamalwa, very well spoken. I think you speak for a lot of members of this House who have made effort to come up with bills, and they are stuck up in the pipeline. And I know even from the other parliament, the 11th, there are many bills that members had come up with that never saw the light of day. And that is frustrating, and it's true. It de-energizes members of parliament from pursuing the work that the people of Kenya have mandated them to do. So I think our clerk's office must pull up its socks on this one and ensure that when members make proposals, then those proposals must be processed within the procedures that are provided and must find their way to the floor of this House so that they can be debated by other members, and probably then members will be energized to do what they're supposed to do. Allow me then, members, to propose the question, which is that this House orders that the business appearing as order number 11 in the order paper be exempted from the provisions of Standing Order 43, being a Wednesday morning, a day allocated for business not sponsored by the majority or minority party or business sponsored by a committee. Very well, members, is that the mood of the... Very well. I will then, members, put the question that this House orders that the business appearing as order number 11 in the order paper be exempted from the provisions of Standing Order 40, subsection 3, being a Wednesday morning, a day allocated for business not sponsored by the majority or minority party or business sponsored by a committee. Will as members of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as members of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Next business.
Order number 9, motion. Establishment of policy guidelines on RAD for expansion of public schools and a fund for acquisition of such RAD. Question to be put.
Honorable members. Honorable members. Allow me to put the question that aware that land is one of the most important resources in Kenya, from which the country generates goods and services, and a source of livelihood for many people, further aware that land is a scarce resource which is highly sought for various economic and commercial purposes, leaving little or no space for establishment of social amenities, including learning institutions, cognizant of the Ministry of Education guidelines, which provide that the amount of school land should be sufficient, with the minimum amount of land required being determined by enrollment. Concerned that the increasing number of students in learning institutions puts a lot of strain on the available infrastructure, especially those institutions which are established on limited space with no space for future expansion. This House urges the government to establish policy guidelines on land for expansion of public schools and sets aside a fund for acquisition of such land. Will as members of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as members of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Next business.
Order number 10, motion. Establishment of apprentice testing and certification centers in constituencies.
Honorable members. Yes. Honorable members, this one, we had started a debate on it, and there's a balance of 37 minutes. And at the close of business, the last time it was listed, the Honorable Karan was on his feet, and he had a balance of 3 minutes. The Honorable Karan, if he's in the House, no desiring to be in the House, we will move on to the next member who is interested, and that is the Honorable Murungara Gitonga, member for Tharaka.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. I rise to support the motion that seeks to establish apprentice testing and certification centers in each of the constituencies in the Republic. Mr. Speaker, sir, the National Industrial Training Authority plays a very key role in training apprentices in the various types of trades that are available in the country. It is one of the industries that was established onset of independence to train young Africans into trades in which they had no skills. It is actually based in Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu, and Athi River, to the exclusion of the other areas in the country. It is therefore vitally important that we do actually consider favorably and pass this motion so that we do have these centers established in each of the constituencies in Kenya. For example, in my constituency of Tharaka, if there are any trainees taking courses with the National Industrial Training College under the authority, they have either to travel to Nairobi or Athi River, which are the nearest centers. That is a long distance, and it cuts across most of the constituencies in the country. If we were to establish a center in my constituency at Marimanti, this would have several advantages. One, we would have more enrollment of trainees under industrial training taking up most of these courses that help them get self-employment. We would also have distances that they take to undertake exams and training shortened so that they do not have to travel away from Tharaka to Nairobi or Athi River to undertake these courses. It goes without a lot of argument that our country today is focusing on technical training. And this is the reason the government has established technical training colleges in almost all the constituencies. The colleges are getting overpopulated because the courses they are offering are very attractive, as a result of which that overspill is actually going back to their homes without getting the necessary courses. The National Industrial Training Colleges would supplement and complement the TTIs which are being established, as a result of which the youth would actually get the necessary skills that would offer them employment. This is a very important motion that I do support, and I do urge the House we support so that we have these centers brought to our constituencies. Mr. Speaker, I support.
Very well. The Honorable Mbadi, I see you have no interest in this one. Then we shall have the Honorable Manzo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to contribute on this very important motion, Mr. Speaker. It is true that a lot of skills in Kenya, which are in the informal sector, are practiced, by people who have not even gone through formal training. There is a lot of business going on in that particular sector, but it is in particular centers, mainly Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu, and Athi River. But if this was to be devolved to the constituencies such that we have an institution which makes sure that the informal sector formalizes their business, then it is going to reach many more youths. A good statistics, Mr. Speaker, is that right now we've had 1 million pupils who have done KCPE, and by the time they go to Form 4, now this year, only 600 students have done Form 4. So 400,000 students in Kenya are not known where they went to or what they went to do, and most of them went into this informal sector. And most of them learn skills like carving. They learn how to fix vehicles. In fact, one of the best mechanics I know of from Western Kenya, who can fix any car anytime using very modern technology, has never been trained by anyone, only learned through Apprentice, through his uncle, who was very good and who had a garage, have we been unable to proceed to high school for lack of school fees. And we have a lot of such cases. And this is where a nation goes into industrialization. We know in the agenda, in the 4 agendas of developing of the government for development, part of it is production. And unless our younger people learn production, learn the skills, and mostly through apprentice and study from others or learning on the job, then, Mr. Speaker, we are going to lose a lot of Kenyans in this informal sector, And it is good that it be formalized, it be funded, and probably funded through CDF, such that within the CDF kitty, then you have the member of parliament is supposed to set up this center. And all the people with all the wonderful skills in Kenya, in manufacturing, in production, in making goods, which can also be sold outside the country and locally. We've got quite a market here and internationally. Then this is the way to go, such that we have Kenyans who are now formalized, who are in informal sector but are now formalized, and the trainings are availed, and the learning is made clear. And I believe, Mr. Speaker, if we do this, we are going to have a lot of Kenyans, go into usefulness and into production in this country. We have very skillful Kenyans, and most of them, what they lack is opportunity, and most of them do what they like, and especially in artistic works. Mr. Speaker, yesterday, a young man came to Parliament and he just uses a pencil and he can come up with a very accurate picture. And I believe such a skill...
The Honorable Kingola, just hold on, the Honorable Manzo. I'll give you your remaining 2 minutes. The Honorable Kingola, you have just walked in and I see you have pressed the intervention. That is out of order.
Thank you, Chair. I was requesting, this is a very important motion. Mr. Speaker, can we agree, the whole House, that every speaker gets 3 minutes?
No, you are out of order. You are out of order. You are out of order. The Honorable Kingola, I know you just wanted to hear your voice on record. But I know you also know the rules in regard to that request. So the next time you want to make that kind of request, please follow the rules. The Honorable Mando, you have your
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You can see the river is mentioned here, Mr. Speaker. And you know this is one way of the centers, and I think that's the interest of the Honorable Patrick Kingola. I thank him for the interruption. So, Mr. Speaker, this is a very, very important thing. And in fact, Honorable Kingola is right. I will not talk more so that other members can contribute and give ideas. But I do agree and support that it should be devolved to the constituencies and let it come alongside with the kitty for CDF, and I'm sure members and their teams will make sure it is implemented, and a lot more young Kenyans who are talented will get an opportunity to earn a living. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. The Honorable Yusuf Haji, member for Mandera West.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I stand to support this motion. It is a very important motion in that many of our youth who could not even manage to, who dropped out of school and could not move forward, have gone to these technical colleges. And after completing the technical college education, they are not accredited. They don't have certificates, authentic certificates. And therefore, they are not employable. Although they have the skills, they are not employable. And where they are employed, because they don't have the necessary accreditations and certificates, then they are ill paid. Their wages are too low, like any other casual, like any other person who has not gone through any training. And this is because the testing areas are just too far from most of the constituencies. I take an example as Mandera West constituency, the place where the youth can come after this training for accreditation is Nairobi, which is 1,100 kilometers. And it costs, the cost is just prohibitive. These youth who have never worked before, just completed, cannot afford to travel all the way to Nairobi, stay here in lodgings, and look for these very important, very vital documents. Therefore, taking these documents to constituency level is the best that can happen to most of our youth who are undertaking these various technical trainings all over the country. If maybe for a start, if we cannot, for financial reasons and for budgetary processes reasons, if you cannot take them at constituency level, maybe we can start with at least county level. At least if I talk of county level, the county headquarters from my constituency is just 300 kilometers compared to Nairobi, which is now the testing area, which is 1,100 kilometers. And therefore, this motion is very timely. And if we implement this and it happens, I'm sure we are going to relieve a lot of our youth who have undertaken technical trainings but are not able to get any sort of certificates or any sort of accreditation. With that, I support this motion. Thank you.
The Honorable Mbogo Menza, member for Kisauni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to air my voice on this important motion that has been brought to the floor. Mr. Speaker, as you're aware, many of our youth, and not only the youth, even the elderly above the 35 years old, some of them, they never had an opportunity of even completing the KCP, the primary levels or the secondary levels, and they ended up dropping out of schools because of one reason or another. And most of these Kenyans are highly skilled. They have learned the skills from the various areas where they have gone to seek for employment, like let's say the construction sites. You'll find the best masonries. They never went to any institution to learn that skill, but they learned it through hands-on training on the construction site. The best mechanics in this country, you will find them, they've learned the skills on the various garages in this country. The best electricians, the best plumbers, but at the end of the day, they do not have a document, a certificate to show that they have been accredited by any institution in this country. And why? The reason is, even if you go to NITA today, some of these, because they never went through the formal education training, the testing at the NITA is mostly based on theory work. And these people, they never had an opportunity of sitting in a class, or they dropped halfway. So it is also important when we're discussing this matter, when we decide to devolve the testing centers to the constituency levels, we also have to think on how best we can be able to test these young men and women, not only on the theory side, but also on the practical side, because that is what they have learned on the various places where they were trained. Mr. Speaker, today the government has spent so much money to roll out TVETs in each and every constituency. These TVETs are financed by the taxpayers' money. It is my wish that we do not have to reinvent the wheel. It is a matter of expanding the TVETs to have a department that can be able to conduct the testing in each and every constituency. And we'll just end up spending very little money on that angle. So, Mr. Speaker, for me, this is a very important motion, but I also want to support what Honorable Wamalo has just said when we were discussing about the political parties and what have you. We do not want this motion to end up gathering dust somewhere, because we've discussed and each member has contributed. It is an important bill, we all appreciate that, but we want action on this so that we can be able to take it forward. With those few remarks, I strongly support the motion.
The Honorable Mbogo, I think judging from the passion that you have for this and the passion that has been previously displayed by the mover himself, the Honorable Njagua, and the member for Dagoretti South, I think it will be incumbent upon you to take it upon yourselves to come up with a bill on this so that we can make this into something that will benefit Kenyans. Very well. The Honorable Paul Murigi, member for Igembe South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for giving me this opportunity to contribute in this important motion. I understand that it has been for many years where the young people are not given jobs because they lack experience. This motion has come at the right time where we have to look upon the young people. Apprentice testing and certificate centers will be of much importance if established in each and every constituency. This is because most of the young people, they have skills, but they lack somewhere to practice at the same time where they can acquire the certificate. Because in any job, let's say the mechanic job, the road constructions which are being made in the Republic of Kenya, when you go there as a young person, you are asked for a certificate of that skill which you have acquired. And because we are lacking these facilities within our constituencies, you end up lacking that job you are asking. So I would like to appreciate the Honorable Charles for bringing this motion to this House. And I would like to urge each and every member to support this motion, because this motion will be of much importance to the fellow young people of this republic, because we will be open to many jobs which are, when you go to seek, you are ceased or more ceased away because you do not have those skills. At the same time, this one will help to carve up the idleness which we young people we have, because if we lack such facility where we can go and practice to enrich our skills, we will tend to relax and not even to engage in any activity. So please, my fellow members, let us support this motion so that each and every constituency we can have this facility where my fellow young people can go and acquire more skills so that we can get these jobs. Because if the young people will not get jobs in this country, we will face a lot of problems, because without jobs, it means that someone will engage in those other activities which are not useful to the benefit of economy of the country. So I support, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The Honorable Mwanyanje Mbeyu, the member for Kilifi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this motion brought in by Honorable Charles Jaguar. Mr. Speaker, I think this motion is coming at the right time. Mr. Speaker, we need testing and certification in these informal sectors. Mr. Speaker, as at now, for the last exam, KCPE, I've registered 13,000 girls who did their exam pregnant in Kilifi County. This shows very well that they may not be able to attain marks.
The Honorable Mbeyu, did I hear 13,000?
Yes, sir. 13,000 girls did the KCPE pregnant in Kilifi County. It's a shame, but because we have to come up with a way of helping, these are just girls, 13,000. There are boys who may not be able to attain marks to go to Form 1. And I think this motion is coming at the right time so that we help these young girls and boys who may not be able to get their secondary education. They can do masonry, they can do mechanical, they can do dressmaking. Call it a skill to make them survive. So I think this motion is coming at the right time, and we urge that these centers are established in all constituencies, and more so in Kilifi County, Mr. Speaker, because of these reasons I'm giving it to you, so that we are able to help the young generation to get skills, to be able to take care of themselves, and the ones who get better marks are able to be paid fees for in Form 1 to Form 4. And if the MPs can do more to pay full scholarship for the best students, 350 marks and above in their constituencies, and pay the little fee in these informal sectors for this bigger group, which is drawing back economically and may not be able to make it in a better life, but can acquire skills, get certificates, and do better work in their community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Lochapong Peter, member for Sigor.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this opportunity. I rise to support this motion by Honorable Kanyi that seeks to establish testing and certification centers in every constituency in this country. I want to begin by saying that I think it's important that we get centers where those who have acquired skills and knowledge through working in the informal sector can get certification. I'm aware that it has been very difficult for these people to get formal employment because they have no document to show that they have some skill and knowledge that they have acquired through training in the job. So I want to say that in where I come from, Sigor constituency in particular, we have Kenyans who have acquired some skills in mechanic, in masonry, in carpentry, and yet they have no document to show for the skills and knowledge that they have acquired over time. Now, most of these people have not had the opportunity to go through formal training, either because they have not gotten the opportunity, they lacked fees, and even access to the formal training centers. So I want to say that the motion by Honorable Kanyi would come in handy to help these Kenyans get at least a certificate for the skills and the knowledge that they have acquired on the job. So I want to say that this motion should also seek to decentralize the services of NITA so that we only don't have these services in 4 places in this country. We need to decentralize further to constituencies so that many Kenyans can access the services of NITA, and through that, many of our Kenyans can acquire certification and even be certified for the skills they have acquired. I have a case in point where we have, in Sigor, we have even an engineer who can design even a road that has even become very difficult for engineers that have already been trained. I'm aware of even instances where these people who have not gone through formal training are called upon to come and assist and even help fix certain vehicles, certain problems that arise just because those who have been employed to do that cannot manage. Those who have gone through formal training are not able to do that. I'm also aware that the government has had an initiative where we have technical training institutes in almost every constituency. Some are still being built, some are already complete. How I wish that probably within the TTIs, if it's not possible because of either funding, we have maybe a department within the in the short run that can offer the testing and certification for this apprenticeship people, because there are so many in this country. They contribute about 82.7% of employment in this country. So, Honorable Speaker, I want to say that this is a motion that we really need to support so that most of our people in the constituencies can access an opportunity where they can get certification for the skills that they have acquired. So, Honorable Speaker, for that, I support.
The Honorable Sankok.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to add my voice on this very important motion of establishment of apprentice testing and certification centers in every constituency by Honorable Charles Jagua Kanyi. And Honorable Charles Kanyi, you are a blessing to this country. Because, Honorable Speaker, I've had on several occasions a statement that experience is the best teacher. And for sure, from what we have learned from this country, experience is the best teacher. Because the best mechanic, the best plumbers, the best electricians that we have, and we engage them on daily basis, even members of this house knows that they engage them in daily basis, are people who have just had experience and who have just trained on the field. Honorable Speaker, and not going through formal education should not be a condemnation of a failure. Honorable Speaker, because some of these people did not go through formal education, not because they are not intelligent, not because they are not knowledgeable. It is because of lack of school fees. It's because of sometimes the traditional setup of their different communities. Some of us from the pastoralist community knows very well that for us to access education have been very difficult. And some of those who with disabilities, to access education, especially where schools are very many kilometers away and it is day school, have been a problem. And that does not mean that these people are stupid. No, it is because they did not have an opportunity to go to school. And experience being the best teacher, some of them have emerged as the best plumbers, the best electricians, and the best mechanics that we engage on daily basis. Honorable Speaker, Thomas Addison went through primary school 16 years, and he's the inventor of the bulb. Honorable Speaker, I remember a statement that I read a long time ago in the newspapers, that Kamel Shipatini was told by his teacher while he was in class 6 that he can be nothing better than a carpenter. But we know how active Kamel Shipatini became later on in life and was able to confuse the whole country in the Golden Bank issue. Honorable Speaker, these people may be knowledgeable enough, and that is why it is very important for us to engage them and to make sure that they are certified, they are given certificate, so that they can seek jobs with something to show that they have this experience. Honorable Speaker, it is also high time that the country now start coordinating well its own activities. Imagine NYS targeting training youth, NITA targeting training youth. We have also TVET and their established centers, and I support the honorable member who said we should actually now coordinate all these activities of training our youth, probably in our TVET, because now TVETs are in every constituency. Let us have a department that is supported by NYS, that is supported by NITA, to make sure that we certify, we test and certify our youth, instead of starting from scratch, because starting from scratch, we will be told there is no fund, budgetary allocation, it will go through the committee of budget, which I am sure they will reject from reasons that there is no fund. So, Honorable Speaker, if we can coordinate all these activities, in this country, there is no coordination at all. That is why you find bursaries being issued by NCAF, being issued by county government, being issued by National Government Affirmative Action Fund, being issued by National Council for Persons with Disability, being issued by everybody. And you don't know who will benefit from this bursary. We don't know who have not benefited. We don't know if the vulnerable have benefited. So, Honorable Speaker, let us coordinate the training of our youth. NYS, TVET, and NITA should come together and give us a very candid and straightforward way of certifying, testing and certifying our youth. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable members, I wish to recognize the presence of students, university students from Kirinyaga University, from Kirinyaga County, who are in the public gallery. They are welcome to observe the proceedings of the National Assembly. The Honorable Gikaria.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to support what has been brought. You know, Honorable Speaker, I thought Jaguar had borrowed his name from the this famous luxurious car. Little did I know, actually, his name is Jaguar. Actually, he drives that car. I thought it was a nickname that he borrowed from that. But I want to thank him for being original, you know, in his aspect in terms of even singing. I was once joking to him one day, before he was a very good friend of mine when he was a member of NACADA. And he sang a song where he was criticizing politicians that after 5 years, when they come to parliament, they end up having very big tummies and bellies. So I told him I'm looking at him to see whether in 5 years that is what, so that he can sing another song and say it doesn't happen like that way, that politicians are not people who just go to parliament to eat. They actually come here to, and I've had an opportunity to sit with Jaguar here for the few minutes. And honestly speaking, Mr. Speaker, I didn't know this young boy has such huge talent and thinking about, I only took him as a musician. At some point we thought...
The Honorable Gikaria, did I hear you say, refer to a member of parliament in terms that are unparliamentary?
The honorable member of Starehe.
Yes.
And you know, he beat a very famous politician.
He did not beat.
Oh, he won the elections.
The Honorable Gikaria,
I withdraw.
The Honorable Njagua can only be Honorable Njagua, Charles. And he competed and honorably won.
I want to appreciate that, yes, it is true. He defeated a very prominent politician to become a member of Starehe. And I want to give him a lot of credit. Honorable Speaker, I have had an opportunity to speak to him when we were seated here. And I can see the passion that he had for the young people. And honestly speaking, I can't say more than what he has to say. In fact, if you listen to him on a personal basis.
Precisely, the Honorable Gikaria, it is good that you have said you cannot say any more than he can say because the time now has reached for him to reply.
I thank you.
Very well. So the Honorable Jaguar, yes, the member for Starehe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Who is a young member, but never the other one that the Honorable Gikaria has referred to. You will now have time to reply. But before you do so, if you wish to contribute your time, you can do it before you start your contribution. But you have 5 minutes.
How many minutes do I have, Mr. Speaker?
You have 5.
Maybe I donate 1 minute only because I have a lot. Maybe 1 minute, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. The Honorable Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Jaguar, for giving me an opportunity. Apprenticeship is something that we really need to focus on because this is a country where papers are given more prominence to skills. And in line, and to align that requirement and the dynamics that come with it, it will be very important that we focus our attention on creating apprenticeship programs within our constituencies that will hence give these most deserving people papers that they can have. This motion is very important to the extent that we have so many people who are highly skilled in what they do, but they have nothing to prove. We've talked about plumbers, we've talked about mechanics, we have talked about carpenters, and many other elements of trade. But they really have nothing to show that they have something to, in their heads that help them make a living. We also need to come up with a duration upon which a student shall graduate, and then we quickly want to look at, I know my minutes are quickly running out, but there are many benefits that come with apprenticeship. It increases the employee retention rate by the employer because of access to additional skills. It develops own talent, filling current or predicted skills, shortages by growing own talents in-house. And lastly, it strengthens employer brand because apprenticeships are indeed very big news. And finally, it enhances productivity within a business setup. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Njagua.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I beg to reply. I first of all want to thank members of Parliament who have supported this motion and let them know that support for this motion is showing support for the youth of this country. Mr. Speaker, we are more than 47 young members of parliament who are elected, and I do believe that most of us were elected by the youth of this country so that we can represent them in parliament. But we were not only elected by the youth of this country, we were also elected by their parents so that we can look for solutions to the problems facing their sons and daughters. Mr. Speaker, 6 months ago, the government formed a team called Nairobi Regeneration Team. And one of their major tasks, Mr. Speaker, was to flush out mechanics, carpenters who are operating on riparian land. Mr. Speaker, as the Member of Parliament, I went to Kirinyaga Road where more than 10,000 mechanics were to be flushed out. And the question they were asking me, Mr. Speaker, was that where will they go after they are flushed out from where they operate? And one thing came to my mind. I thought, if these mechanics had their certificate to show that they are mechanics and they can be employed in some of those big industries. And we all know, Mr. Speaker, that even as members of parliament, even if we drive big cars, most of us take them to Kirinyaga Road because that's where we have the best mechanics, Mr. Speaker. So I thought if they had the certificates and they are flushed out by the government, Mr. Speaker, they will go to those big industries and get employment. And with those certificates, they will also be paid good salaries, unlike when they don't have the certificates. If you go to Gekoma, Mr. Speaker, we have more than 5,000 carpenters, the best carpenters we have. And most of them, you find that they're the ones who make those furnitures we go buy in those big shops in this town, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, my request is one, and I want all members of parliament who have good ideas that can help me make this motion, have this motion implemented so that we can help the youth of this country. Mr. Speaker, for like 2 or 3 weeks, Kenyans were all over social media telling us that as young members of parliament, we are not representing the youth. And they wanted us to be like Honorable Bobby Wine from Uganda, Mr. Speaker. And Kenya is not like Uganda. We don't have a dictator, Mr. Speaker, so we don't have to go to the street and fight. The best thing we can do, Mr. Speaker, is come up with policies, come up with bills, come up with ideas that can help the government reduce the unemployment in the youth of this country. We even have a motion, we had a motion 3 weeks, Mr. Speaker, where we declared youth unemployment was declared a national disaster. So, Mr. Speaker, I urge your members of parliament, because I was thinking it's only me who has that problem. I've seen that majority of the members of parliament have the same problem. Mr. Speaker, what I'm talking about is who I am, is because I'm a product of that, Mr. Speaker. There was a time I went to the American embassy to try get a visa to go perform in the United States. And at that time, I had released the Kigeugeu song. And the interviewer told me that I had nothing to prove that I'm a musician, Mr. Speaker. I tried to sing, Mr. Speaker, but they couldn't understand or even know what I was thinking about. And they told me to go to the Kenyan, to go to any institution or go to any organization that will write a letter to prove that I'm a musician, Mr. Speaker. I had to go to Kenya Music Copyright Society, get a certificate that proves that I'm a musician from Kenya. And after taking that certificate, Mr. Speaker, I was granted the visa to go to the United States, Mr. Speaker. What I'm talking about, Mr. Speaker, what I'm speaking about, Mr. Speaker, is being done in other countries like Germany, Korea, where they have a system called dual system, whereby if you go to school and you feel like you don't want to continue with your education, Mr. Speaker, you are taken to where you want to be. If you want to be a mechanic, you are taken there, you are trained for 2 days, and then you go to class for 3 days. So, Mr. Speaker, I will stop there and thank all the members who have supported me, and I do believe if we come up with motions, bills, and policies that will help the government, next year, in the next few years, Mr. Speaker, the problem of the youth and unemployment will be a thing of the past. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Njagwa, you need to reply. You need to say the words, I beg to reply, so that you are complete. I beg to reply.
I repeat again, Mr. Speaker.
You need to just say, I beg to reply.
I beg to reply, Mr. Speaker.
Very well done. You don't have to, the Honorable Njagwa, I heard you talking about the Honorable Robert Chagulanyi from Uganda. You don't have to cross the border to be an effective member of parliament like the way you are now. I think you are representing the youth of this country well, and we are glad that we are in this house. Very well done. The Honorable Sankok, you had something to say?
Yes, Honorable Speaker. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. I'm rising on Standing Order 53.3. And I request you, Honorable Speaker, to defer putting the question until probably the following day or the time that you may decide. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker.
Very well. Thank you, the Honorable Sankok. Your request is well received, and will therefore defer the putting of the question under that Order 53.3. I'll therefore direct that we move to the next business.
Order number 11, motion, report on the audited financial statements for the Political Parties Fund for the year ended June 2017.
The chairperson of Special Funds Committee, the Honorable Kathuri.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I want to move this motion that this House adopts the report of the Special Funds Accounts Committee on audited financial statements for the Political Parties Fund for the year ending June 2017, which was read on the tip of the House on Wednesday, August 29, 2018. Honorable Speaker, I want to really thank the House Business Committee for giving us an opportunity to speak to this motion this morning, and also to thank the honorable members who passed this motion this morning to give us permission to execute this motion. Honorable Speaker, Special Funds Account Committee is one of the 3 watchdog committees in this parliament. And Honorable Speaker, our work is actually to ensure that this House fulfills its oversight role to enhance accountability, efficiency, and effectiveness in application of public funds. Mr. Speaker, at this time you realize that the executive, which is headed by His Excellency the President, is very, very keen on how public funds are spent. And as a committee, because we look at the audited reports from the Auditor General, our work is actually to ensure that we look at the reports and bring our reports to this House so that Kenyans can be able to know how funds are being spent, Honorable Speaker. Political Parties Fund, Honorable Speaker, was established by the Political Parties Fund Act 2011, which actually actualized the provisions of Article 92 of the Constitution, which provides for the establishment and the management of a political parties fund. And Honorable Speaker, in order to improve our democracy and to enhance democratic space, political parties should be well funded. And because there is a law which has really established how the funding should go, that should be exactly followed to the right, Honorable Speaker. And the purpose of the Political Parties Fund is to enhance democracy, as I put it, through promoting the representation in Parliament, in the county assemblies of women persons with disabilities, youth, ethnic, and other minorities, and marginalized communities. This is in addition to promoting active participation by individual citizens in political life, covering the election expenses. As you know, elections are very, very expensive, and it's only through funding political parties through the exchequer that the political parties can be able to get funds to do their work. Honorable Speaker, to achieve this, revenues allocated to this fund actually must be administered in an effective, efficient, and transparent manner. And in addition, the fund must be allocated through the requisite amounts of revenue to support well-governed and managed political parties, as envisaged in Article 91 and 92 of the Constitution of Kenya 2010. Honorable Speaker, if parties are not supported through the exchequer or through treasury, at some point, democracy is compromised because those who fund the party then can be able to decide on so many things. But when the party is strong and it is funded, then they don't need to look for financials, because the financial can decide who should stand, maybe like in Mboni constituency, for instance. A party can decide who should contest in a certain, especially during nominations. Therefore, if parties are well funded, even the nominations can be more free and fair, because if we have briefcase parties, then we can get problems in our democracy. Honorable Speaker, Article 229(8) of the Constitution of Kenya 2010 provides that within 3 months after receiving an audit report, Parliament should debate and consider the report and take appropriate action. In addition, Section 68(1) of the Public Finance Management Act 2012 states that an accounting officer for a national government entity, Parliamentary Service Commission, and the judiciary shall be accountable to the National Assembly. Further, Section 23 of the Political Parties Act 2011 states that there is established of this fund, Political Parties Fund, and this fund is actually administered by the Registrar of Political Parties. Honorable Speaker, on this basis, the committee invited the Registrar of Political Parties, who appeared before the committee on the 3rd of July, this year, 2018, during examination of the report of the Auditor General on financial statements of Political Parties Fund for the year ending 30th June. The report that we tabled actually contains recommendations arising from observations and findings made by the committee during the deliberations within the registrar of, with the Registrar of Political Parties. Honorable Speaker, the committee observed that the Registrar of Political Parties had taken administrative actions geared towards addressing all matters raised in the report of the Auditor General. The committee recommended that the registrar undertakes implementation of the information conformity and the disaster recovery plan during the financial, the current year 2018-2019. Honorable Speaker, one notable issue that we also observed is that during our deliberations is that the Registrar of Political Parties established that the revenues allocated to political parties fund is based on a criteria established by the National Treasury. In this criteria, Honorable Speaker, out of the total revenues received and audited, allocations are first made on the public debt, pensions, constitutional salaries, county governments, parliament, judiciary, constitutional commissions, and equalization fund. And the balance is used to determine the allocation of the political parties fund. That is where the bone of contention is, Honorable Speaker, because we feel that the right formula is not used in establishing what should go to the political parties. Because on this basis, Honorable Speaker, the committee recommended that the Cabinet Secretary in charge of the National Treasury and Planning comprise with the provisions of Section 24(1)(a) of the Political Parties Act 2011 that provides that sources of the fund be such funds not being less than 0.3% of the revenue collected by the national government and may be provided by Parliament. Therefore, to us, Honorable Speaker, we want the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee actually to take up this matter, and because that is the substantive department or committee on this matter, and this the registrar and and Treasury, especially the registrar, is supposed to is accountable to that committee to further go and see how this can be put into perspective, because it is contradicting the act, Mr. Speaker, because before this fund is given the 0.3%. The first deduct all other expenses, public debt, pensions, constitutional salaries. So to us, the 0.3% should come from the audited revenues in that particular financial year. And I hope this can be made clear, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the committee expresses its appreciation to your office and that of the clerk of the National Assembly for the support extended to us during the deliberations of this report. The committee further extends our appreciation to the Office of the Auditor General and the National Treasury for the complementary role that they continue to play as we execute our mandate. Honorable Speaker, you know we have so many political parties in Kenya, and one thing that the people might be asking is why this money is given to few, one or two political parties in this country. And the reason is that these parties do not meet the threshold so that they can really get this money, Honorable Speaker. And I want to inform members and the general public that in order to get this money, Section 25 of the Political Parties Act 2011 actually explains how this fund is distributed. And for the purpose of record, I want to state that this Article 25(2) states that notwithstanding Section 1 above, a political party shall not be entitled to receive funding from the fund if, so that those who have ambitions of establishing political parties can be able to clearly know that the party does not secure, if the party does not secure at least 3% of the total number of votes at the preceding general elections, or B, does not get more than 2/3 of his registered office bearers are of the same gender, and the party does not have in its governing body representation of special interest groups, and the party does not have at least, this is now where the beef is, if the party does not have at least 20 elected members of the National Assembly, and 3 elected members of the Senate, and 3 elected members who are governors, and 40 members of county assemblies. If a party does not meet this threshold, then it is not possible to benefit from the political parties fund. And now, Honorable Speaker, I think we might still adjust or review this act, because like in this house we have 15 or 14 independent members. Therefore, this fund actually should also be able at some point to review the act, so that also if we have more than 20, still 20 independent members in this house, those members can also be able to benefit from this fund, which also the independent members can be able to explain or to enhance democracy. If you see that the political parties might miss your elections, then you can go to the independent way, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, with all those few remarks, this is a straightforward on the tender account, and the report is very straightforward. And I request now my colleague, Honorable Elastas Nzioka Kivasu, to second this motion, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Nzioka Kivasu, member for Boni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for the opportunity to second this motion on the audited financial statements for the Political Parties Fund for the year ended June 2017. I thank the chairman for the work well done. I think this is our second report to the Nairobi County constituencies report. And based on the recommendations that are made in this report on the onset, I would like to second. One, Mr. Speaker, sir, on the ICT conformity on the information and backups, we understand the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties has already been able to set the ICT steering team that has come up with various plans, including the ICT strategic plan, the information conformity and disaster recovery plan, and these plans need to be implemented, but what they are waiting for is the availability of the budget, which we are recommending by 2018-19, needs to be factored in so that this can be implemented. And request the support of the members of parliament so that this recommendation can be implemented. Two, Mr. Speaker, sir, on the finances allocated to the political parties fund, the 0.3%. This is basically from the revenue collected by the National Treasury. But our realization during the deliberations was that the political parties fund only get a 0.3% of the net balance after the interests from the government are already met. The total expenditure, even having the equalization fund factored in, that is the time they do computation for the political parties. And to me, that is a misconception that needs to be put straight, and the cabinet secretary should be able to release the actual 0.3% of the revenue collected, not the net balance. And I hope the relevant committee will look at that as a plan to implement some of these recommendations. Mr. Speaker, sir, with that remark, I second that motion on the adoption of this report. Thank you.
Very well. Honorable members, I wish to propose a question, which is that this House adopts the first report of the Special Funds Accounts Committee on audited financial statements for the political parties fund for the year ended June 2017, laid on the table of the House on Wednesday, August 29th, 2018. It can't be that honest. Honorable, is that Honorable Okello? It can't be that quick because I can tell there are quite a bit of interest. Honorable Oduol Adhiambo.
Mr. Speaker, can I speak later?
Very well. Honorable Jeremiah Kioni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to say one or two things about this report. One is to commend the committee for the work that they are doing. We have had them in other, we have had their reports for other special funds, and we want to commend the leadership of that committee and the committee as a whole. The second thing, Mr. Speaker, is also to appreciate that the political party funding, and in fact even the issue of the whole of the political parties, was carried in our constitution for the reasons that we wanted to ensure that we entrench democracy and proper governance in the constitution in a manner different from what we had from 1963, when parties would exist at the desire and the express authority from those who are in the leadership of the executive. Unlike then, now we have political parties governed and protected by the Constitution. And in the thought that they needed to operate without being in the pockets of a few individuals, this political party funding was provided for in the Constitution. And as the Vice Chair and the Chair has noted of this FAD committee, or the Special Funds Committee, we still have not been able to get the whole funding as it was expected or anticipated in the Constitution. The executive is still playing with the figures to the point where very little money adds up to where it was intended to be. But I think, allow me to say that, Mr. Speaker, when we put the 0.0 or the whatever percentage you put in the Constitution, or the amount of money that's supposed to go to the political parties, we did not quite think that it would be the kind of huge sums of money that we see today. And I think that is what the executive is still grappling with. Because if we were to allow, and I hold the view that we should, but if we were to allow the total amount of money to go to the political parties as they are today, you certainly will have very, very strong political parties that, if not regulated in another way, can easily become a stumbling block for the movement of the executive and the rest. And I know that is the fear. And I think one of the things the Special Funds Committee can help us by doing is looking at the statutes again and see what else can be done with this money by the political parties, to grow the political parties, but not to allow the money to end up in a few members' pockets. As it is today, the 2-3 big parties that receive the funding, we know the money is being used by the political parties. But let's just say it, that how that money is used, again, is determined by very few. We may have the reports that we have as they are today and tomorrow and the audited account, but the majority of these parties, the decision-making is still concentrated at the top. It will be good to see this money trickling down to the counties, to the constituencies, so that the parties are grown from there. And I think the Funds Committee, the Special Funds Committee, will help us more, and I'm sure they have the ability to do that, to ensure that the statutes provides for the way the money should trickle all the way down to the ordinary members of the party. We are very active, very vibrant near the elections. And you can see parties like with big offices, we know a lot of huge things that talks of huge money. But immediately we are done with elections, the following day, the exercise is to close offices. Funga hiyo, sorry, that is, close that office, close that one, so that again, the resources are left at the top. We need to ensure that these funds find their way to the ground. We need to see party offices being grown or being established at the grassroots level. And perhaps in so doing, then those who are mistreated by the party will not be mistreated by the party, because the party will have had time to grow from the grassroots. And the people at the grassroots will have a better authority or position. They'll have a better voice when it comes to our being elected. As it is today, we will see that we have branch chairmen and secretaries and the rest. And, but when it comes to elections, they really have no voice. The voice is still left with the minority leader, who is still a minority even at the top. And he decides how the majority will behave down there at the grassroots. And I think it's because we provided for a lot of money. I can say this is not, when we were doing, and he was, I see the minority leader here, when we were doing the Constitution in 2010, we never thought that $1 billion shillings would be availed to political parties. If we knew, I'm sure we would have thought of, providing for how was the money to be spent. Because we don't want the $1 billion shillings to end up in the pocket of the minority leader and the others whom he reports to, which I think is what is happening currently. No, not this minority leader, but he is the one who is, he would tell us how they spend the money anyway, because the party I belong to also, we know how we spend our money, but we also want to see it going down to the grassroots. So, Mr. Speaker, I think what the chairman highlighted is also very important. For those of us who would want to form parties quickly, and I've been in the leadership of 2 political parties that have been wound up without my consent. We were wound up from the back door somehow, and we ended up without a party. I was at one point the deputy party leader of a party called UDF. How we lost it, it was bought, wow, we just saw people closing offices, and we thought the offices were ours at one point. So even the issue of the Political Parties Act, we need to be very careful about it. We need to encourage these political parties to own assets. One of the ways of ensuring that parties are managed and controlled by a few is to ensure that they have no assets. The only asset you have is the pocket of the party leader. And he moves around with his pocket in the trouser. But if they own properties, for example, let me give you an example. Like we have the canoe. However much you would want to wish away canoe, you can't kill canoe. Because somehow they have assets across the country. We do not quite know how they are owned, but they are there and they belong to the party. So anybody who would want to kill canoe has a lot to do. But when we had a party like UDF, which quite did not own much, other than the spirit that belongs to a few of us, to wind it up was like people would sit over a cup of tea somewhere, and they wind it up without your consent. I can tell you, because PNU owns an asset in this town, they have a house somewhere along Musagitao Road. To wind PNU up has been difficult. So I think one of the ways of securing political parties is for the fund, the Special Funds Committee, to also look for ways of, as one of the conditions, to access this money. Let them be buying property. That way, you secure the political party beyond the life of the leaders. Because without strong political parties, even us functioning in this parliament will become very, very difficult. Pushing an agenda will be very difficult. For now, it looks easy because we have some parties that are strong, they have some leadership, we can identify with the leadership. But if we are all scattered into very small parties, and this house has like 20, 30 small parties with members who can switch sides freely, the management of the country can be difficult. So we need to pay more attention to this. I want to support the leadership of the committee and call upon the CS Treasury to ensure that the amount of money that's supposed to go to this special fund goes. Let us work on how to manage it when it is still with the parties. And I'm sure also, as part of the constitutional implementation team, we'll also be calling some of those people to find out how is it that they're implementing the constitution. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker.
Before I give minority leader, shall we have Honorable Onyango, member from Muhoroni?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to speak to this motion. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that the audited reports as have been tabled by the able committee of this House reflect a good progress in terms of our aspiration to grow up political parties. It's unfortunate that experience is the best teacher, and we are reading from very nasty experiences because my colleague talks about KANU having been the strongest party and with infrastructural developments almost everywhere. But the one big mistake that we are making with these political parties is that we are still allowing them to belong to particular party leaders, such that if KANU was the Baba and Mama of those days, and even if Baba went, the mother should have been around to nurse the baby or look after the baby still, but because we willingly put it in the hands of an individual. Once the Baba went, and the KANU, with all the large infrastructural developments, with all the big names, is almost wiped out. And similarly, we are putting a lot of money, which is taxpayers' money, in the hands of almost individuals, such that because of lack of proper audit, that would follow up and make sure that the monies that are given to the political parties are spent properly, and they're used for just the purpose of growing those parties, so that you find within a short time, if the party leader is is changing to a different party, that party dies and the money also disappears and no trace of it. You cannot talk about the money that Honorable Kioni and the then now ANC leader, the money that they were given during those days, he can't account for them properly because he was deputy party leader by name, and he did not even contribute much in growing up the party, so that there are no traces of what happened to that party during his tenure. So we want us to learn from the past and make sure that whatever monies that we will give to these parties, they're used for making sure that democracy grows and that the money is used properly so that the parties can remain, the parties can grow, and the parties must be managed by able leadership that must emanate from grassroots election to wherever it is, to the pinnacle of those parties. Otherwise, I want to support, and I believe that this report should be supported. Thank you.
Honorable Minority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to start by thanking and congratulating this committee, the committee that is headed by my friend, for doing a good job. And I also want to say what my other colleagues said ahead of me, that this committee has actually managed to bring a report on accounts, or audited accounts, of some constituencies, quite a number of them, which we have discussed. And I think probably for the first time in a more organized manner, we have been able to discuss reports of constituencies. I want to also say that this is a plus for this committee in terms of bringing a report on how political parties spend money that is allocated to them. We all know that Kenya decided through the 2010 Constitution to make itself, or to create this nation to be a multi-party democracy. And by doing so, we also went a step further, and in furthering and deepening democracy, to allocate annual revenue to the political parties to be managed by the Register of Political Parties, so that political parties are run professionally, independently, and without relying on patronage of specific individuals or donors. In fact, the act governing the management of the funds of political parties is very clear that there is a percentage that you are allowed to contribute in a particular financial year to your political party or any political party of choice. And I hope and I believe that the Office of the Auditor General is looking into that to ensure that that is not violated. Mr. Speaker, I am speaking as the chairman of the Orange Democratic Movement Party, which is one of the largest parties in this country in terms of membership and also even in terms of elected members in this country. And I'm also speaking as one who is deeply involved in management of resources of that particular political party. I want to say that it makes sense to be prudent in managing finances, because political parties compete to form governments. There is no way you can convince us that you'll run a government if you cannot demonstrate prudent financial management of resources that are allocated to that particular political party. And in that breath, I want to confirm here that my party has faithfully and almost every year, in fact, even this financial year, the financial year that ended 30th June 2018, we managed to beat the deadline of 30th September to submit our audited accounts to the Office of the Auditor General. And Mr. Speaker, that we are doing as a sign of responsibility. And I want to encourage that all political parties which benefit from public funds in whatever manner, even if you are not getting directly the money from political parties' fund, that you need to demonstrate prudent financial management and submit the accounts to the Office of the Auditor General in time and have them audited and answer to audit queries as and when you are asked to do so. But Mr. Speaker, I want to talk on a few things. One is the law is in place for how much should be allocated to political parties. The reason why we decided to put specific amount defined in law is we didn't want this matter of allocating funds to political parties to the discretion of the Treasury, because every time Treasury is part of a government, and there is always one political party that will be in power at any particular time. And allowing one particular political party to determine how much should be allocated to other competing political parties is not rational, so to speak. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I don't understand why the Treasury is finding it difficult to allocate the 0.3% that is allowable in law or provided for in law to political parties for the running of these political parties. The reason why we, as a country, decided to allocate funds to run political parties is because we did not want individuals to own political parties. We want political parties that would exist even beyond and after the political party leaders. And Mr. Speaker, as I want to give an example with my party, we have been housed for now, well, from 2005 to date, is well over 13 years, at a place which is known. I think we are the only political party that has existed in one location, the longest probably in this country. I don't know of any other political party that has maintained its headquarters that long in one specific physical location. But Mr. Speaker, because of some misunderstanding with the landlord just wakes up one morning and tells you, now I've given you notice to vacate my premises in 3-6 months. And I think this, Mr. Speaker, the landlord did this probably, and it is unfortunate that the landlord was my competitor and was not successful in securing nomination for the party. And because of that, now the landlord wakes up and tells you, you have to take a walk. Mr. Speaker, these are the things that we need to avoid by giving capacity to political parties to own their headquarters. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy that my party, through that challenge, in fact, sometimes you need to be subjected to some stress to be able to think and act properly. My party is in the process of acquiring headquarters. I think we are going to be one of the very few parties, if probably there is any, which will own their party headquarters. And I'm sure by December this year, we are going to own a party headquarters for the Orange Democratic Movement. But that should happen to almost all major political parties in this country, if not all political parties, so that we know for a fact, if you want KANU, we know where to go. In fact, if you ask me today, since I don't know whether since KANU lost KICC, I would not show you where the headquarters of the independent party is. Much as it has faced attrition over the years, and it is now a small party, but we have historical ties with that party. That is the independent party, and it is a party that we have to respect. So if such a party cannot have headquarters, Mr. Speaker, it just demonstrates that we are a country that does not respect political party establishment. Mr. Speaker, I would like to know with clear prediction where I would go to find Ford Kenya, which is my partner in the NASA coalition, where I would find ANC, where I would find, I can hear Honorable Ferdinand is shouting, but you will realize that either that house is rented, the one he's talking about, or has been provided by one of the party big, probably himself, because I know he's a man of means. So, but Mr. Speaker, till when will we be relying on philanthropy and goodwill of specific politicians? So, Mr. Speaker, that is something that I think needs to be looked into. I was listening to the chair of the committee, the mover of the motion, passionately talking about the independent members in this house and trying to bring an agenda that even the independents should benefit from this fund. I want to disagree with him. I want to remind the chair that independents do not belong to a political party. As a matter of fact, there is nothing really in terms of ideology or principles that the independent members share in common. They have just found themselves here as independent members because they could not run, they did not identify them, either they did not identify with any political parties that exist in terms of policies and principles, or they were mistreated by those political parties. Hence, they decided to run as independents, which we really congratulate them, because I really admire and respect those members who won on independence, because I know how difficult it is really to be able to convince the voters to leave political parties that they identify with to vote for you as a person and as independent candidate. I want to congratulate them and encourage them, because it is also deepening democracy. It awakens political parties which are mismanaging the process of identifying candidates to know that you really need to go a step further and think through before you issue that certificate to a candidate to run on your party. But Mr. Speaker, in terms of allocating the money, there is really no justification in law. It does not make sense, because really, how do you even manage that money? Because each independent member is independent from the others. So really, apart from sympathies that we would express to you for going through a lot to win your seats, there is really, truly very little. It is my hope, Mr. Speaker, that I know the court had already pronounced itself on this 0.3%, and we need to respect court orders. And Mr. Speaker, it is my hope that the Treasury will honor the promise that they gave us when we were discussing the last budget, that they are going to factor in, through supplementary budget, additional funds to be able to move towards meeting the requirement in law. This is something that is in law. Unless you amend the law, it remains. And I think if this 0.3% can be taken to political parties, and by the way, those of us who manage the political parties' funds, we manage those funds prudently, I would tell you for a fact. Yes, there are people who probably also have the appetite for using funds which are meant for public good and converting them to private good. But those can be found through, because this is public money, you can find it through the Auditor General. Even DCI can conduct investigations, and EACC has the mandate also to conduct investigations. But those parties which want to manage their money, funds prudently to promote interests of those parties, especially interests of the marginalized groups, we would want to see, for like now, I know in this country we are pushing the 2/3 gender principle. If we had funding for political parties, the political parties should be the first ones to promote this agenda by holding meetings and educating their members across the country, and even holding meetings to sensitize their members in the National Assembly and the Senate, because that is where there is the biggest problem. You will find when that bill comes here, half of the membership of this House will not be in the House, yet there is a requirement of 2/3 to vote that amendment to go through. It is because the members absent themselves because they have not been sensitized enough to understand that this principle is so important. That is why the people of Kenya made a decision to put it in the Constitution. It is also important to hold youth events to discuss at the political party level the issues that affect the youth of this country, so that when you are preparing to form a government, those of us who are not directly in government, if you are fighting to form a government, you need to be clear in your mind, or to be clear as a party on the needs and requirements of the youth of this country, so that you can come up with policies to help promote the agenda, which is a time bomb, by the way, Mr. Speaker. It is a time bomb. The issue of youth is the biggest challenge in this country. I'm happy one of my members had brought a motion to this House to declare it a national disaster, and this House actually debated and agreed with that honorable member. Mr. Speaker, I know my other colleagues also want to contribute to this motion. I want to thank you for allowing me to make this contribution, and I thank the chair and the committee for doing a good job. I support.
Honorable Baride.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to add my voice to those of my colleagues in relation to the motion before us. And let me just begin first by really congratulating the chairman of this committee, Honorable Kaduri Murungi, and the entire committee for a job well done. It's a first in this parliament, never happened before. And I think it is important that we are beginning to bring to fore matters relating to the political parties fund and how it's been used, so that we can really put them to account for the monies, taxpayers' money that they continue to receive from the national government, and ensure that the money is well utilized and makes real impact to the citizenry of this country. Mr. Speaker, I have looked at the Political Parties Act, Article 2, that really gives this fund and shows how the money will be secured and how much will go to them, and what are the qualifications for being entitled to this important fund, Mr. Speaker. And it says that the party will not be entitled to receive funding from the fund if the party does not secure at least 3% of the total number of votes at the preceding general election. And I think the whole idea was to make sure that we do away with the issue of briefcase parties that do not have the following of the masses, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, but it also goes further to say that not more than 2/3 of its registered office bearers, both at the national and the county level, are of the same gender, again to ensure that we do include women in the leadership of our political parties. And it goes further to note other qualifications for which political parties must meet before they can get this funding. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to add my voice to that of the minority leader. And, you know, it talks about the purpose of the fund. What is the purpose of the political parties fund? The minority leader should not worry. I am just really supporting what he has really raised in a very able way. The political parties fund is money is supposed to help in promoting the representation in parliament and in the county assemblies of women, persons with disability, youth, ethnic and other minorities and marginalized communities, and also ensure the active participation of individual citizens in political life, and also can do civic education on various issues. And I have looked at all those roles or purposes for this fund, and it is clear to me that the fund hasn't actually been used for those particular purposes, because for the longest I've been in this house, and especially, let me say, within the life that this fund has been operational, I have never seen us, you know, called by the party, other than just a normal PG, to be talked to about critical issues that are coming before the House, and to get an awareness on what's critical and why we need to support it. And here I'm not talking about the party leader calling us, I'm talking about the party itself within its own structures, finding it fit to call members on critical issues that come before the House. And in point, I want to mention the issue of the not more than 2/3 gender rule, where we've brought, in the last parliament, we had 2 attempts, which both failed. And I want to say that I never saw my party really call us or call members to urge them to support that bill. Yet, one of the purposes is the representation in parliament of these marginalized groups, of these groups of, that is women, persons with disability, youth, and ethnic minorities. So I hope going forward, we as members of parliament can push political parties to support the very purposes for which the fund was started, Mr. Speaker, because we have critical issues around women, we have critical issues around youth, we have critical issues around persons with disability. Right now, government is putting together what they are calling the Biashara Fund, where they are putting together all the funds that have been there, Women Enterprise Fund, Youth Enterprise Fund, Uwezo Fund, all of them into one big unit called Biashara Fund, and concerns that we'd like to deal with. Concerns of, is this fund going to become an impediment to women, youth, and persons with disability accessing it? Because part of the reason why these funds were established in the first place was to ensure that the money is accessible in an easy way, without bureaucratic red tape, to these particular groups, Mr. Speaker. So I would want a situation where we are called to discuss it, from the political parties. And it cannot be that the only time political parties come to us is when matters political come here. When we start talking about constitutional review, they wake up, they call us. We want to be called even on matters that are affecting our people, matters that are affecting special interest groups, so that we can be able to take care of them on this house, Mr. Speaker. I really hope that going forward, Mr. Speaker, we are also going to see political parties putting their money to empower youth, to empower women on political participation. We want training on leadership at the grassroots level for women who will be taking up and youth who will be taking up positions as MCAs, as MPs, as whatever it is, but at the grassroots level, because right now the role is mainly played by NGOs. So since we have our own money and we have control over it, let us see that happening going forward, Mr. Speaker, and I hope that the women, the youth in this parliament, because we have a critical mass of young parliamentarians here, and persons living with disability, we can now begin to push political parties to play their role with this fund, because they are not doing it. And I believe it is time that we woke them up and insisted to see real activities towards these critical sectors, Mr. Speaker. With those few remarks, I beg to support.
Should we have Honorable Okello Odoyo, member for Nyando?
I thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as a member of the Special Funds Accounts Committee, I rise to support this report. Political parties play a pivotal role towards advancement of democratic ideals, and at the same time, they are established with a view to seize power and control instruments of government. The freedoms that we enjoy to this day have been perpetuated by, to a larger degree, political parties. And therefore, their participation in our advancements cannot be properly underscored. Mr. Speaker, we have heard about funding issues. It was put in law unequivocally that out of the revenues collected by the government, we should apportion 0.3% to go towards political parties. What we noted during the course of our interrogation of reports from the Auditor General is that a very paltry 0.1% is allocated to political parties. And even though it should be based on what has been collected by the government, they look at a formula that firstly deducts what goes to county government, what goes to equalization fund, upon which what has been left is what goes to political parties. And even besides that, there has been a continual allocation of a specific fund in terms of the general aggregate. The formula upon which the Treasury relies on to give out these monies is so skewed that at the end of the day it leaves political parties with nothing but to suffer on the streets to get monies to run their affairs. So I think we must follow the law. We must follow both the Constitution and Political Parties Act in order to run properly the affairs of these political parties. Such that what is meant for political parties, as the Bible would say, give Caesar what belongs to Caesar. Let's give political parties monies that are due to them. Mr. Speaker, my political party, Orange Democratic Movement, of course, as everybody knows, apart from KANU, this is, and Ford Kenya, this is one of the parties that have withstood the test of times. What is your party? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Any political party would now want to be recognized, and therefore I recognize all political parties. But suffice to say, ODM has consistently posted unqualified audit reports for the last 10 years, consistently. And I think in the advancement of purity of elections and purity of usage of public funds, political parties must adhere to financial, public finance act so that they do not swindle monies that are gotten from the suffering taxpayers. So, and as my chairman did allude, my political party, where I sit as a National Executive Committee member in charge of resource mobilization and public policy, we are acquiring a new office in due course. Before the dawn of the new year, ODM party will have its own headquarters, bought by its own funds, gotten through its own channels, where I play a pivotal role. And I think we also need to challenge all political parties, as the chair did say, that with certainty we should know where these offices are. Let's challenge ourselves to acquire our own offices to run our own political matters. Mr. Speaker, we also noted that the immediate former Registrar of Political Parties, Madam Lucy Ndungu, had been in an acting position for the last 10 years. Her predecessor, her successor now, Anne Deritu, is still on an acting position, though she has only served for the last 3 months. Mr. Speaker, if we are going to allow public officers sitting at very important positions, on an acting positions for too long, then I think we also negate their powers to make certain decisive issues that ought to run the affairs of their own dockets. And you ask, why would somebody sit on an acting capacity for 10 years? This doesn't sit well with even labor relations acts and all that enabling laws that govern labor. So we need to find out a formula upon which one can only act within a set period of time and not to leave it as an open-ended thing. We also need to curtail the establishment and winding up of political parties at will. If we are to take an example of what happens in the United States of America, only 2 parties have existed forever. You talk about a Democrat or you're talking about a Republican. In fact, this morning, they were posting results on the midterm elections, and I'm glad that Democratic Party has seized most of the positions, particularly in the House of Representatives. So everybody knows that you either belong to the GOP, which is a Republican, or you're a member of the Democratic Party. In Kenya, even now as we speak, we do not know which political parties are going to exist in 2022. The last 4 elections, we have had a new party coming into power, hence creating a lot of confusion to our people. I think this country needs to step back, reflect, and retool, and only have the political parties that will be there today, tomorrow, both for us and the generations to come. But this kind of confusion, I think it is high time that it got stopped forthwith for the well-being of our democratic ideals. And with all this, Mr. Speaker, I support the adoption of this report. I thank you.
Shall we now have Honorable Denita?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to also support the adoption of the report on the audited financial statements for the Political Parties Fund for the year ended June 2017. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that I belong to that committee, the Special Funds Accounts Committee. And Mr. Speaker, we deliberated quite a bit on this report. And Mr. Speaker, I can say whatever is in this report is what we deliberated, and I really want to thank the chair and the team of the committee. Mr. Speaker, we know the role that political parties play in strengthening our democracies. And Mr. Speaker, for me, I think that political parties should be able to be funded to be able to run their affairs. And ideally, Mr. Speaker, as you are aware, in this country, apart from the fact that Kenya has almost over 60 political parties in this country, we do have currently a system in Kenya that people think that probably we have a system of about 2 political parties based on the coalitions. Of course, the Jubilee and the NASA coalition. But Mr. Speaker, we have over 60 political parties in this country. And Mr. Speaker, each political party has a role. And I'm happy, Mr. Speaker, to quickly even say that even as we think about these political parties, it is good that the political parties funding, Mr. Speaker, is something that is inscribed in law. It is in the Constitution. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, when such a law is there, Mr. Speaker, we have no choice but, Mr. Speaker, to follow. But, Mr. Speaker, what I have seen in this country, and from even the political party that I come from, you know that I'm a very proud member of the ODM party. Mr. Speaker, we have seen situations in this country where political parties have to keep literally begging the treasury to release money to political parties. Why does it happen when it is law? Mr. Speaker, that is extremely wrong, and we therefore need to ensure that if it is law, Mr. Speaker, Treasury needs to release money for political parties really on time. And Mr. Speaker, this is a very big problem. If you look at political parties, Mr. Speaker, you will find that political parties like myself, we have so many factors that we are taking into account. Mr. Speaker, political parties, because political parties are basically supposed to bring everyone on board. In the spirit of leaving no one behind, Mr. Speaker, should apply even to political parties. To ensure, Mr. Speaker, that the youth, the women, people with disabilities of this country, Mr. Speaker, are also taken care of in the political parties. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, even where I come from my angle of political parties, we have the women wing, we have the youth wing, we have the persons with disability wing in that political party. So that, Mr. Speaker, Kenyans who want to participate in political parties actually feel they belong to those political parties. Mr. Speaker, as I have mentioned, I have said that political parties actually have a very, very big role. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, we need to also make sure that we are mandating Treasury to be able, Mr. Speaker, to release funding, Mr. Speaker, to the political parties that we have. Mr. Speaker, as you are aware, even when some political parties receive funding, Mr. Speaker, we also have offices in the various counties and constituencies where our large population of people who participate in politics, Mr. Speaker, belong. Mr. Speaker, it is therefore important for me to ask political parties also to ensure that they develop, as Mheshimiwa Honorable Mbadi said, Mr. Speaker, we need to compel political parties to respect the law and to ensure that political parties also adhere to the PFMA Act. Mr. Speaker, the PFMA Act basically sets structures and ensures that funding, Mr. Speaker, and finances are ably and well managed by the political parties. And Mr. Speaker, having said that, I also want to say that even as we move forward, Mr. Speaker, we have also to ensure that even within the registrar of political parties, because Mr. Speaker, the funding, the political parties funding is actually administered by the registrar. And Mr. Speaker, when you give such a huge task and a huge important role to the registrar, it is therefore important, Mr. Speaker, that this person who manages political parties funding, Mr. Speaker, is given a serious contract and on time. Mr. Speaker, that probably explains the reasons why we all the time had political parties going to court. All the time our parties are taking the registrar to court. Simply because, Mr. Speaker, this registrar does not have a permanent contract or a contract of some years that guarantees her existence as the registrar managing that fund, Mr. Speaker. And that probably explains why even the registrar, the former registrar, Mr. Speaker, was not able to control and to manage how funding, Mr. Speaker, through the Treasury goes to political parties. And that is why maybe, Mr. Speaker, she probably did not perform, as most people probably thought, probably she did not, she was not able to perform. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, having said that, I also want to say that even within our structures of political parties at the counties and at the wards and at the constituencies, Mr. Speaker, we need to ensure even that, Mr. Speaker, as political parties, we are strengthening these structures. At the county levels, Mr. Speaker, where we have the youth wing, Mr. Speaker, I would even suggest that political parties at national level probably, Mr. Speaker, release their funding to support those offices of counties. Mr. Speaker, we can have a mechanism or a way in which funding actually goes direct to the women wing at the counties, to the youth wing at the counties, to the disability wing at the counties where I come from. Mr. Speaker, I also want to use this opportunity to challenge the Jubilee Coalition, Mr. Speaker. The Jubilee Coalition needs to come up with a wing that is called the Disability Wing of the Jubilee Coalition. So that, Mr. Speaker, people with disabilities who definitely participate in politics are also able to be funded by political parties to be able to run the affairs of themselves and of their parties. Mr. Speaker, lastly, I want to suggest, and I also want to ask, Mr. Speaker, that we do ask the registrar and the political parties themselves to make sure that they are capacity building, Mr. Speaker, of the parties. We have, in a way, Mr. Speaker, in this country, depended on the NDI. The donors, Mr. Speaker, you have seen so many times that anytime we are talking about issues political in this country, we are actually looking at the National Democratic Institute, the NDI, the Sunni. Mr. Speaker, that is the State University of New York, supports political activities in this country. We are looking at the NED, the National Endowment for Democracy in the US, and many other political affiliations, Mr. Speaker, and huge think tanks who come to support our parties on political grounds. Mr. Speaker, it is the role of the political parties themselves to capacity build its people and its staff. And I support the member who said, Mr. Speaker, that political parties need to just go beyond expecting funding. We need to look at how we can own property. We can own ways of generating income to support our various people who want to participate in the political process. So therefore, Mr. Speaker, having said that, I want to say that I really, really agree with these reports, and I really want to thank the chair. Mr. Speaker, we took quite some time to discuss about an issue that affects everybody in this country, Mr. Speaker, who has a keen interest in participating in the political process. So, Mr. Speaker, allow me to support. I thank you.
Member for Funyura.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for this opportunity. I rise to support the motion, and I also want to commend my friend for the good work he's doing to lead that particular committee. Mr. Speaker, I think the history of political parties in this country is very rich, and I think we are where we are due to the good work that many of the doyens of politics have played to get us to this level. Many of us look back with nostalgia, the days of KANU, Baba na Mama. We look back with nostalgic view when you had to become a member of KANU to even to get an ID. We look back with a lot of fond memories. When you drive to the university, you are chased to go home. You had first of all to go pledge your loyalty to the members of KANU in your constituency or your sublocation before you are given a clearance letter to return to university. And I think it has been worthwhile, the fight in the 1990s to change the constitution and delete section 2A so that to have political pluralism. At least now for today, if you have, unlike in the past, when you will be held before the KANU disciplinary committee, expelled and lose your seat, at least nowadays you have various options. You can choose to join the most important party, ODM, or choose to join new parties that keep on coming up every election year so that you can contest a political seat. That said and not done, Mr. Speaker, it is important that we appreciate Section 91 of the Constitution that basically sets the rules or the principles guiding political parties. And I would want to urge all the political parties, all Kenyans and the executive to take cognizance of the provisions of that particular article so that they appreciate the importance of political parties in our constitutional dispensation. Political parties is the vehicle through which we express our political views, is the vehicle through which we come together to seek solutions to the myriad of problems that affect this country. I therefore want to urge the executive to seriously facilitate political parties. We have had this debate in very many forums about the inability or the obvious sense of sabotage by the executive towards political parties. It is inconceivable that we have to literally go begging to the Treasury to release funds to run political parties. I would sincerely urge the committee and all those involved to honestly push the executive and the Treasury to release funds to political parties in good time. But as members of political parties, like it happens elsewhere, we need to fundraise and support the activities of political parties. A political party is just like any members club, it's just like any chama or any small groups you join. We must fundraise to ensure that we supplement funds that come from the Treasury, funds come from the donors, and funds come from the benevolence of the party leaders and the party founders. Indeed, the only way we will manage, so to speak, to tame or manage party leaders or party founders is to make sure the political parties are financially independent, not dependent on some few members to fund and finance the activities of political parties. As much as we focus on the funds from the Treasury, we members that belong to political parties, it is time we made our effort or we made our commitment to support the various activities of political parties. For example, at the grassroots level, it is not conceivable to wait for the national headquarters to bring funds to mobilize activities on the ground. We party members must be willing to support those activities. We should sincerely copy the model in the US, the Democrats and the Republicans, where they massively fundraise for their activities. We must also copy the model of the UK, where the Labour Party and other parties contribute to finance the activities. It's not just be left to the party to fundraise its US members. In the like manner, there have been cases of fraud, cases of unethical management of resources, cases where there's unprofessional management of funds. I want to urge party leaders and those who run parties to be accountable to the funds that they receive, both from the members as well from the Treasury. It is so annoying, it's so shaming that funds are brought and then a few individuals here and there loot or misuse the funds for their personal gains. I'm happy that my party ODM has managed to run the affairs in the most transparent manner, and in all the years I've known the party, all our audited accounts have been certified. They have not been qualified in one way or another. Finally, Mr. Speaker, it is important for members to appreciate that belonging to a political party is a commitment that you make. The issue of party discipline needs to be critical and central if we want to strengthen political parties and if we want to make our politics mature. It is unfair to belong to a political party and perpetuate ideologies of another political party. We need to find mechanisms in which we can make arrangements to punish or de-whip or bring to line those members who go against party positions. If you are courageous enough and if you know you are strong enough on the ground, the moment you disagree with your party position, it's only reasonable and it's only professional or it's a sign of maturity for you to resign from that party and seek a re-election or seek another political party to use for the next election or in the event there is a by-election. But it is sad, it's a shaming that you purport to belong to a political party and then you associate with the enemies of the political party. With those few remarks, I stand to support.
Honorable Leonard Brighton, member for Konoini.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to applaud the Special Funds Accounts Committee for the report on audited financial statements for the Political Parties Fund for the year ended 2017. Empowerment of political parties is empowerment in terms of democratic space in the country. The issue of political parties is so sensitive and very emotive. I'm drawing this to one conservative party life member who, in his last days in this hut, he actually resigned and joined Labour Party. And when asked the reason why he was resigning, he said that it is better to die a Labour than actually die a Conservative. So, so you look at the whole aspect of empowerment of the political parties, and you appreciate the fact that political parties should actually be empowered through funding. And look at also the issue of USA, where we have Democrats and Republicans, two bulls in the field. They do fundraising. Of course, they also contribute, like we contribute. Personally, I'm a member of Jubilee, and in every single month, we contribute something for the benefit of the running of the party Jubilee. It is important to note that especially Section 24 of Political Parties Act 2011 provides for sources of revenue into the fund, as such funds not being less than 0.3% of the revenue collected by national government as may be provided by Parliament. So you look at the law that actually is backing up this contribution by the government, and it is very, very clear. And that is why it is very important that we build political parties through funding. Political parties funds should not only be seen to improve political parties' democratic space, but also it should, in the real sense, be practical. And in this, therefore, I really support and I applaud this particular report. Thank you.
Honorable Wanyonyi Kevin, member for Kwanza.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity. And on onset, I think I want to talk about this revenue. I think you have done a good job. And I want to thank the committee for having come up with this report. First and foremost, Mr. Speaker, I want to say this. It is true, the money given to the political parties, I want to disagree and say that it should be based on the revenue given. That means 0.3% should be from the revenue received from the treasury. Other than after the expenses, becomes very little money. In fact, Mr. Speaker, for your information, I belong to the second oldest party in this country, no dispute. For the Kenya, is the second oldest party in this country after KANU. And I stand to be challenged by anybody here. Of course, the other coalitions have come. As a party, the oldest party, I've got to agree that we should, first and foremost, and I agreed that we should have headquarters based. I want to inform members here that we are housed on Agwens Kwadek Road, and the building is called Oginga Odinga House. The founding father of democracy in this country, Mzee, the late Oginga Odinga, that house is called Oginga Odinga House. and you can see where I'm coming from. Mr. Speaker, I want to say this, that therefore, the 3%, the 0.3% is very little. And on page 17, I'm just looking at, out of curiosity, about the allocation of the funds. The first one is Jubilee, which is given whatever it is. And I know that 2017 election, which I took part, and I'm the chairman of the my political party in Trans Nzoia County. I worked very hard because we belonged to a coalition called NASA. I therefore take exception on this page on table 5 of the distribution of for the financial year 17-18, that the first one is Jubilee, agree. The second one should have been NASA, because that's a coalition that took part 2017, and that's why we're here. Although, of course, you know, given the children, we'll always quarrel each other. I agree. We have been quarreling, no problem. But we came here as NASA. And therefore, it's wrong for this committee to have put the Orange Democratic Party, and yet it's part of the coalition. You know where I'm coming from, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker? And therefore, all I'm saying is that the percentage, therefore, would have gone up from what it is to what they received, 112 million Kenya shillings. If it was a coalition of both NASA, of NASA, that's the ANC, Ford Kenya, ODM, a Wiper Democratic Party, the funds would have been higher. It is out of this that I take an exception. Mr. Chairman, I think you have just coming in. I want to be informed why when it came to distribution of the money, 2017-18, you put in Jubilee. Jubilee have no problem, because Jubilee is made up of other coalition parties. But when it came to number 2, you are talking about ODM. Why? ODM belongs to NASA coalition at that time. So that should be corrected. And therefore, we would really expect, for the benefit of other small parties that are in the, then we'll have got a higher money. And then, of course, Mr. Speaker, it now becomes at the whim of one party, and they can give and refuse to give. So, for example, Wiper Democratic Party will just go there and beg. Ford Kenya will go there and beg. ANC will go there and beg. And therefore, Chair, we need to correct that one. At one stage, that location should be able to be corrected, because it's not ODM, it's actually NASA at that time. Much as we may have broken up, what have you, or maybe quarreling among others, that's normal politics. We are here because of politics. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I think that correction must be done, and be done. Chair, that you've come in, please, let's look at that. Otherwise, I should be confused. I came here on NASA ticket. Yeah, for the Kenya, which is a coalition of NASA, and many others. 2, Mr. Speaker, I also want to say that we should have this habit of the money going to the individual parties becomes the money belongs to the leader of that particular political party. Yeah, it should be actually so that we have a regular audit, which I think the committee has made it very clear. This money is a public money. Much as the donation have gone out of my way, I think I was said by my party for the Kenya, I went looking for money in West German, which money came in, and that money does not belong to the party leader. It belongs to the party. And therefore, the committee is right. That must have regular auditing of the party, of the money that is received. That I agree, and as a committee, I think you came out very, very clear. It is true. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, I don't need any information from anybody. I don't need any information.
Honorable Member for Kwanza, why did you predict that you want to be given information? I want to give Honorable Kadhuri. He is on a point of order. What is it, Honorable Kadhuri?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, my good friend Honorable Wanyonyi has defined to me severally that the chair you should collect. I want to inform him that my committee does not mutilating a report from the Office of the Auditor General. The person you should write it to is the registrar of political parties. Maybe you did not write to the registrar when you did the coalition, the NASA coalition. And what she has is ODM and not NASA. Therefore, the person you should write it to as Fund Kenya is to the registrar of political parties. So the chairman of special funds has no power to change any report from the Office of the Auditor General.
I'll take it up from there.
Honorable Kadhulu, you seem to have informed member for Kwanza. Honorable Kadhulu, you seem to have informed member for Kwanza. He didn't need the information, but from his face, he seems to have appreciated that information.
I have not been informed because I know that for fact I'm the chairman of my political party in the Trans Nzoia County. And I'm one of the oldest members of that political party. And as I said, for the Kenya is the second oldest party in this country, no dispute, after KANU. And therefore, you know what I'm talking about. We deposited our agreement with the Register of Political Parties as ready-made. And of course, we actually made a deposit with the political parties registrar. And that's why NASA actually took part in the last general election. And therefore, I just want to agree with you that maybe somebody somewhere went behind our backs and did that. We are taking it over, and I want to agree with you, we'll take over from now, because we now see why we are getting less money. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, these funds are not, as I said, it's not meant for political party leadership. It's meant, A, to be able to sensitize the general public, particularly the youth that belong to that particular party, women that belong to that particular party, and the general public of that particular party on the democratic ideals of the situation today. It's not meant to be a favor that a party leader gives you some money as a branch or something like that. So that money should be used wisely, because that money goes to the democratic ideals of our country, and therefore that again should be done. So then, given that money, and the money is enough, we should have regular meetings. Do you see that money? Not for anything else, but regular meetings to be able to educate the public on the democracy in our country. Therefore, with a caution, much as I want to support this report, but I want to revisit the issue of the revenue allocation to the coalition parties. I'm not supported, I'm in between. Thank you.
Well, that is a new one, Honorable Member for Kwanza, the one in between, but nevertheless. Before I get to my right, let me give Honorable Bui Robert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to also make my contribution on this very, very important motion that deals with political party funding, and of course the report by this very, very honorable committee. Mr. Speaker, the committee generally has been doing great work. The Committee on Special Funds, from its inception, Speaker, recently we had the occasion to listen to them present 3 years audited financial statements of CDF of all the constituencies within the county of Nairobi, and they are quite a lot. I think that this committee is really working very hard. It is second only to the Committee of Delegated Legislation that I sit in, which the Speaker himself said is the best committee. So I want to say this must be the second best committee. Allow me, Mr. Speaker, because we are talking about political parties, to mourn the death of my party leader's father, who passed away and is going to be buried this Friday. And I would like to urge that all members, let us converge in Seikuru, in Mwingi, so that we can send off our dear late grandfather, who gave birth to our party leader, who was a former vice president, and of course, party leader of the Wiper Democratic Movement of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, as we discuss this issue, I want to begin by saying that in the developed world, the democracies are very strong. And one of the things that helps the democracy in those countries to operate as they do is because of the political parties. The political parties, for example, in the US, we are talking about 2 major political parties. And I've had occasion to visit, and you find that, and in fact, a lot of the parties, those 2 parties have departments that actually try to encourage the growing democracies of the world to also be able to reach where they are. I remember severally in my first time in Parliament, I had occasion to meet with the National Democratic Institute from the US, who actually go around training, political parties in this country. And so obviously for them to reach there, it means that the Democratic Party in the US has enough funds to run their affairs, and have even got extra money that they can use to come and try and encourage the growth of democracy in other countries. So it is important to note that political parties need to be funded. Now, if you fund political parties, you allow them to do more activities, and you reduce also pressure on the members. If you have a political party and the only money they're depending on, Mr. Speaker, it basically means that the members of that political party are under constant pressure to raise money for party activities. And that is why you find that many times at the end of the 5-year term, just before elections, the nomination processes in a lot of our parties are completely flawed. That is simply because there are people who need to make money. The political parties have no money, even to manage simple things like the nominations. So it is important that we do fund these political parties, and we fund them properly. Now, in the issue of funding, of course, we have to fund them on a timely basis. It is clear that the Exchequer has been having issues of funding. In fact, it's not just in political parties. Even in our own CDF, the money comes very late. In our own parliament, the money comes late. We have planned activities of our committees that cannot take place simply because there is delay in the release of funds from Treasury. So it is important that we also strengthen our sources of funding and our collection of revenue so that we have enough money to run affairs of this country and, of course, to fund our parties on time. It is also important, Mr. Speaker, that these political parties be audited. You see, political parties are made up of politicians, and politicians are generally the ones that are in these assemblies, our National Assembly, our county assemblies, our Senate, and they are supposed to have one responsibility, which is called oversight. One major responsibility of oversight. That means they must be looking at the executive at the county and at the national level and how they are spending public funds. Now, for us to be able to audit the national government and the county governments, we must also be able then to ensure that the money we receive from the Exchequer, taxpayers' money, is also used prudently in our own political parties. So I want to thank this committee because they've done a great job to ensure that those audited reports are looked at and to give a clean bill of health to the parties. Now, Mr. Speaker, the management of this fund, I want to support my colleague from Ford Kenya. He says that there is a problem. If you look at the formula in which this money is shared, we are saying that it has to be political parties, and the political party to qualify has to have 3% of the total votes cast, has to have 20 members of parliament, has to have 3 senators, 3 governors, and a minimum of 40 MCAs. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, it is very silent on the arrangement that is called coalitions, which is agreeable. We can form coalitions for purposes of going into an election. Now, what we are facing here is a situation where we went into a coalition called the NASA coalition. In the NASA coalition, we have ODM, we have WIPA, we have ANC, we have Ford Kenya. Now, Mr. Speaker, in the sharing of those monies, you must realize that in the process of going into a coalition, some parties sacrificed the position of presidency. So the presidency was given to ODM. That literally means that there will be obviously more votes cast for ODM because the presidential candidate is from their party. Mr. Speaker, it is also obvious that a lot of times, just because the president is coming from one party, even all over our regions, you find that people are more aligned to that particular party, even though it is within the coalition. So ODM has benefited.
Order. What is it, Honorable Babu? Seems to have pressed an intervention.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The honorable member should know what the presidency means, Mr. Speaker. The presidency means the president and the deputy. So, honorable member comes from WIPA. they were very much advantaged, Mr. Speaker, during the last election, where the presidency had ODM and Wiper. Thank you.
Seems to be, again, an information, but Honorable Bui seems to be frowning. Honorable Bui.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I had no doubt that my party leader was a deputy presidential candidate. And when I speak about NASA, we have got other parties. We have got ANC, we have got Ford Kenya. So I'm speaking on behalf of the whole coalition. And I'm also not speaking against ODM. I want that to go into record. I am actually speaking about coalition arrangements going into the future. This arrangement of NASA is not within these political parties, parties act currently. And so that is what I'm speaking to, because I have to speak life. Because in the future, there will always be coalitions. Even in 2022, we will form other coalitions to win the presidency, because we must get to State House. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that that arrangement needs to be thought through. As we look at the funding, we must consider those people that go into coalition arrangements, because if you just look at political parties, we disadvantage some of the smaller parties within coalitions. And you see, for a growing democracy like ours, coalition arrangements make a lot of sense. For a country like ours, where there's a lot of tribalism, coalition arrangements make a lot of sense. Because if you're going to say each individual party for itself, I can tell you for sure, Wiper would have gotten, if we had a presidential candidate, not as a deputy, we would have had the 3 governors. We would definitely have had the 3 senators, because we would have gotten all the votes from our backyard. So, Mr. Speaker, it is something that we need to look at going into the future. Now, Mr. Speaker, I want to finish by talking about political party discipline. And I think it's important, because even as we talk about funding, this money that we are talking about also comes from our members. Other than the money that is collected, the Act is very clear. Other than the money sent by the Exchequer, even our own contributions go into building our parties. And it is unfortunate, Mr. Speaker, that if you look at the statements of some of our parties, there's a lot of members that don't even make the contributions that they signed up to do at the point of election. And, Mr. Speaker, something needs to be done. Because if people do not have the discipline to pay the party dues, then how do they have the discipline to represent their people? So I think, Mr. Speaker, going forward, it is important that the Registrar of Political Parties cracks the whip, because we do try many times to report these people who run away with political party funds, and seems that like nothing is done. So we need to have the registrar crack the whip, so that we can have these people disciplined properly, so that we can have monies that are enough to run the affairs of our political parties. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Yusuf Haji, member for Mandera West.
Thank the committee led by my eminent friend here for having come up with such a very nice report. The conveners of our constitution realized that funding political party is a very important support to our development of democracy. And hence, the political party fund that is enshrined in the Constitution, which is 0.3% of the revenue, has been well thought of. It has not just come by accident. I think it must have been found to be very necessary in order to develop our democracy. But when it comes to how that fund is regulated, how that fund is released, how that fund is shared, among the political parties, this is where we have problems. Regulations have that political parties which have a certain threshold in parliament representation are the only ones to get these funds. For example, we have smaller parties. Smaller parties, if I take a very good example of my party, the EFP, Economic Freedom Party, which was formed 4 months before the elections, and which has 5 members of parliament in this house today, and of course, so 27 MCAs at some county levels. Such political parties are not considered for funding at all. And if those regulations are not changed, when do we expect these political parties to grow? When do we expect the democratic freedom of the whole country be achieved? Because what happens is that my suggestion is that where a political party member of parliament elected through its mandate, then it should get some money commensurate to the members that it has in parliament. But when we said only those big political parties, then we shall remain to be always subject of those political parties. I have to, my small political party, EFP, have to always look for a coalition of another party in order for it to survive or get a small piece of that fund. When on its own, it was able to come up with 5 members of parliament and many other members of parliament at county levels. These regulations have to be looked at. Days when we had a monopoly of party, olden days, I remember when it was KANU and KANU. If you are interested in any political position and KANU doesn't like you, even if you are liked by the masses behind you, and during the Mololongo, big lines are made. If you are not the person who is liked by KANU, then what happens is that line is pushed to the other side, where the KANU likes it. Those days are gone. But still, if we look at our political situation today, if you are not in Jubilee or NASA, even if you are a political party which have fulfilled all the requirements of a political party, to an extent whereby you have ganged up and come up with 5 political parties, you still have no funds. Which means in the near future, after 5 years, you either perish or join one of these big ones. Are we going back to the KANU era? That, I think we need to look at it. Independence is very important. And independence is based on the funding of the political party. A political party which have no funds cannot be independent. It will always look for a way of surviving it. There are regulations which says we must have 24 offices in 24 counties of this country. To run offices of a political party, one office of a political party, it requires enormous amount of money. But the regulation says you must have 24 offices. Just imagine a party like mine, EFP, which is being forced to come up with 24 political offices, political party offices in this country, and have only 5 members of parliament who are contributing to that. I'm forced to sell my camels in order to fulfill those regulations. That has to be looked into in future. Otherwise, the idea of funding political parties from the state coffers, I think that is even a way of reducing corruption. Because from our history, we had leaders, political party leaders, who, because of the amount of monies they have, whatever source that money, wherever source it came from, then you have to follow him or her. If not, you have no room in politics. And in order to avoid that, I think, and in order to avoid corruption and dependency on a few individuals with the big pockets, then came the idea of funding political parties from the state coffers. In this, I stand to support this report and request my able chairman here to ensure some of these sentiments that are coming up are included. Thank you so much.
Honorable Babu, member for Embakasi East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support the motion on funding of the political parties. Mr. Speaker, we are from the dark days where there was no democratic space in this nation. During the KANU era, Chama cha Baba na Mama we only knew of one party. I can see that honorable member is getting agitated, but that is the truth. So, Mr. Speaker, during those dark days, people were never given the space to exercise their democratic rights. And now that there are parties, Mr. Speaker, we cannot run these parties on air. These parties are like institutions. These parties require funds, just like ministries. Without money in the ministry, Mr. Speaker, you know what to expect. There will be zero performance. Equally, with the parties, Mr. Speaker, there are people that are employed in these parties. The parties provide employment opportunities. These people are employed up to the grassroots level, and these people need to be paid. There are activities which need to be run in various parties and in various, at ground level, Mr. Speaker. I stand to support the report that these parties should be funded. And we know very well that 2% of the revenue should go to the parties, to the political parties. And since 2013, the government has not implemented this, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, the government should rise and implement this. However, Mr. Speaker, there should be checks and balances, because there are some of the useless parties which are confusing Kenyan citizens. These parties have no MCAs, no MPs, no any other person elected in any position. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, such parties like the, Sixth Way Alliance, those parties, Mr. Speaker, should be deregistered with an immediate effect, because there is no value they are adding to the normal Kenyan citizen. Thank you.
Honorable Oduol.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for opportunity to speak to this motion. Thank you also for allowing me the time, because I wanted to look at the report. And I want to start, Mr. Speaker, by thanking the chair and the committee, because having looked at the report, indeed, it is one that brings very critical issues. Mr. Speaker, as I start, I would like, because I am aware this is a house of debate, and it is extremely important that we learn from our seniors. And as I listened, Mr. Speaker, I noted that Honorable Member, who is my leader, Honorable Bui, indicated a critical way of getting us to move forward, and so did the Honorable Member from Kwanza. But Mr. Speaker, my understanding was that when I look at the table, we were talking about allocations that would go for political parties. And I think as I speak with honor and respect to my leaders, I would have liked to be, if you like, educated, because my understanding was that Jubilee is a party, NASA is a coalition, and so the report, indeed, that we are given, and the formula that was being used, to me seems to be in keeping with what would happen in a House of Rules and Procedures, and for that reason, I really would like to appreciate the kind of observation from the chair that if we want to move forward, then we would need to do it in a procedural manner. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, I want to just emphasize that strong, healthy political parties are really what we need in our country. I believe that when we are talking about political parties, we do want to recognize that it is the incubation place for leadership, and that it allows us, as those who subscribe to a particular leaning in terms of what they would like to do to meet the needs of the people, not only to organize and see ways in which they could form government, but when they do not form government, they would then need to be organizing to see how they can come up with alternative policies. For this reason, Mr. Speaker, it is indeed extremely important that we see that it is normally said he who pays the piper somehow tends to be the one to call the shots. And I think I allowed opposition, the position which we have, where we now would want to make sure the political parties are not depending on those who are external funders, even as we appreciate the NDI and the other groups. I think it's extremely important that we do have a provision that would allow for 0.3%. Mr. Speaker, having said that, when I looked through the report, I noticed on section 3.3, number 8, that there is a matter which is still in court, but because it is in the report, Mr. Speaker, I would like to assume that I can raise this. One issue that I would have liked to see, either as a way of recommendation or as something that comes out very, very clearly. Not only do we have, from the perspective of our oversight role, where we clearly indicate that there would need to be 0.3%, and I want to thank the committee because they were indicating this should not be done after all the other deductions. But we recognize that currently we have 0.1, that is what that was released. But much more critical for me is that we had a situation where for 3 years, consecutive years, the monies was not remitted. So, Mr. Speaker, I would just want to reiterate, as I support this report, that we do need to see that political parties are really the bedrock. They are the premise upon which we are going to organize, and that a key factor in that organization is independence in terms of finances, and therefore it would be very, very important that not only do we seek to see that the 0.3 is given, not only do we try to ensure that it is not done when all the other deductions are done, but much more importantly, that we ensure that we do not get 0.1, and that when we are even getting that 0.1, it does not come much later. And as I conclude, Mr. Speaker, I also would like to take note that the position of the registrar of political parties is indeed a very, very important one. And as one member had indicated earlier, it would be useful that we do not get into the habit of ensuring that somebody acts for as long as 10 years. Mr. Speaker, as someone who has come to Parliament through nomination of the ODM party, and particularly on the grounds of looking at how it is to increase women's participation, my eye tends to look at the pattern. And I am concerned because I see that the acting registrar before for 10 years was female. The acting now for 3 months is female. Mr. Speaker, I hope we are not going to get a situation where when we get capable leaders who happen just to be women, then we keep them on acting positions. Because whenever you are in a position and you are made to act that long, it sends the message to people that perhaps you will be going anytime. It also does not give you opportunity to make decisive action. And so as I conclude, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the committee, and I truly hope that as we talk about political parties, we will bear in mind that it is a very, very important training ground, and we would like to ensure that it gets sufficient funds. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Shall we now have Honorable Moroto, member for Kapenguria?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for giving me also this opportunity to sincerely thank the committee for this wonderful work that they have done. I think this is a new committee in this house, but it's really showing that those people who are made to be there have knowledge on issue on these special funds and the report they're giving. And I know not only this one here, more to come. They are going to help us. Mr. Speaker, I want to also join my colleagues, especially when we talk of funding political parties. It is a worthy thing, because these are the decisions from Kenyans when they were making the constitution. Because they had to compare what was there before, when Kadu and Kanu and others were there. They realized that it was just like somebody's property. But however, because some of us have been there and have seen what was used to happen during those days and now, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that I can credit that it is now the worst than even the Kanu time and Kadu. Because you remember what happened even after, like what happened in the 2007, 2008, even up to now. 2017, immediately during the election and the day after, August 8, you saw what happened. In fact, Kenyans are still suffering. Some are still in the hospital. Some lost. And that's why I can concur with somebody who's talked of discipline in our parties. Mr. Speaker, I think more needs to be done to streamline and ensure that political parties behave well and conduct their campaigns proper. In fact, personally, I want to even say that the Kanu was better than what is happening now. Because during Kanu, you could not see what is the number of deaths we are now seeing or realizing, and the suffering Kenyans are going through now. Mr. Speaker, it is still the same. Yes, we are funding. Kenyans are funding these political parties. But it's still being run by individuals. Like if you go now to ODM, you cannot do it without the party leader. Even this one of us, I'm in the Jubilee, you cannot do without even the political leader on the other side. So what is the use of having these political parties? In fact, it's better to have an individual running it, and just we sing the chorus of that person and forget about other things. Otherwise, I want to say, thank the committee and through the chair who is now with us here. He's a good guy. And I want also to echo what is it EF, what your party? Yes, EFP. To say that, in fact, you can, where the AFP conducted their campaigns, you cannot, or you've not even read through papers that people lost their lives. In fact, it's better to go for these small parties than these big ones here, where in fact, they are rotten as they move around, Mr. Speaker. I want just to stand there and say, well, let us improve and support even these small political parties. They can do better than others. Thank you.
Honorable Oduol Baka.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. Just like most members here, I'd like to applaud the committee that have come up with this report. The auditor report on the funds for the political parties is a good thing because it demonstrates first and foremost that parties are ready to have their books audited, and that what may be said about parties, that money is given to the parties and they do not account for that, does not arise. So it's a good step that shows that parties are ready to be transparent and to have the funds that they have received audited. It is also true that when you do not get funds to improve your party, like we never had parties getting funds from the state, today we do. It's a great history of democracy in this country. It's a promotion and sustainability of democracy and to spread the word of democracy across, and that parties given funds from the state will be stronger than ever before. Many parties across the world are equally supported, but more importantly, they're supported by their members. So apart from the money that we receive from the state, the parties still need to raise their own money because they cannot just wait for the state to give them money to be audited, but they must also raise funds from their own members. So the role of parties to me is very huge, and the state should give their part without hesitation. If they can only give 1% and not 3% and take a lot of time to do so, the delay in disbursing funds, then that is the beginning of frustrations for a party. It means that parties that are frustrated as a result of lack of funds will never grow, and they will never actually champion democracy, freedom, and all that goes with human rights. So it is important that the state become more responsible in disbursing funds, because these funds, once disbursed correctly and used well, it will be audited and we will see how the impact has been. There is the argument of small parties as well, not receiving funds, and there's the argument of bigger parties getting the bigger chunk. That is really the logical thing to do, generally. When you are big, you get big money. When you are small, you're given little. Even children growing sometimes are given little food. Not that it is a good thing, it's a bad one. But at least big parties have wider space to cover. If you talk of ODM party that I belong to, it's a national party. It's across the country. All parts of this country feels it. And so you cannot give it such little money compared to other small ones that, you know, are within one constituency or something to that effect. So it is necessary that even though you have small parties, there's a formula that works that can help small parties get something so that they don't go scot-free. But I think what is critical in every party is to be able to sell themselves and to sell yourself, your policy, your agenda. When you take over leadership, what you want to do, you need to be supported to spread your word out, because it may be better than a bigger party anyway. Small parties grow into bigger ones. So we need to encourage small parties. We should not lose hope, but when their funds and the formula works well for them, why not give them funds to improve and grow? At the same time, bigger parties must also not own the funds that they have. They should always display what they have and how to spread it and how to utilize it. And more importantly, I've seen that even though we receive funds, parties do receive funds, they still need to go to the ground. They need to devolve the parties up to the grassroots. It tends to become more expensive when a party has a presidential candidate. That's where the party spends a lot more money. The presidential candidate should never spend money from his pocket or her pocket. That is what happens worldwide. A candidate, your presidential candidate, is supported by the party, by the members, because you want to win an election. And so there's need to pump more money into these parties. And therefore, the government should think about supporting them apart from the funds that they receive from the membership or well-wishers, because some parties also get money from abroad. They get money from well-wishers that are not necessarily from the country, or they get funds from foreign bodies. And even this should be audited. How much do you receive from a foreign country? What interest do they have in a local party here? What is happening here? So everything needs to be audited here. It's just not the money that comes from the state, but the money that party members also contribute to that, and the funds that also come from outside the country. Otherwise, I want to really appreciate the work that has gone into this report, that it is a demonstration that parties are ready to have their books audited and that they are transparent, and therefore there should be no fear that once funds are disbursed to parties, the money will get lost. Thank you, and that's my contribution for this particular report.
Very well, very well. Honorable Rono, member for Keio South. I doubt you're on record.
I'm on, Mr. Speaker.
Please use the next one.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity to support this report for funding the political parties. In my opinion, it's a good report, but it should not be used to open a Pandora's box for every Tom, Dick, and Harry to register a political party. Like my colleague has said, we should narrow down to those political parties that manage to bring members of parliament to the National Assembly, failing which they should not get any funding. Two, I support the member who said that it actually reduces corruption, because as you see, if you don't fund the political parties, people will be geared towards getting money and fishing money from all over the place to be able to fund political parties. I support my colleague who said he may even end up selling his camels, and ourselves we need to sell mbusis to be able to fund political parties. Equally, Honorable Speaker, political parties in Kenya, unfortunately, are more or less individual. If you look at ODM, for example, ODM is Raila, and Raila is ODM. You go to another party like Wiper, it's Kalonzo, and Kalonzo is Wiper. We need to move out of that. We want rules and regulations to be put in place so that a party can stand on its own, not ownership, as if it's an individual party. If the guy falls up and moves away, that's the end of the party. So I spoke to my colleague the other day, and I told him, what do you think about ODM now that we have shook hands with Jubilee? They have shook hands with Jubilee. What do you think about it? And he clearly told me that when we reach the 2022 elections, I believe each party will have to stand on its own. And I challenged him that what would happen if Raila doesn't stand? Then he says, I mean, whichever party Raila stands in, that is the party. That if he decides to call it Chama cha Mapinduzi, then that is the end of the story of ODM. So we need to come out of that so that we put measures, we put rules of parties in place. We make them geared towards the Constitution so that we are able to be proud of our parties. If you look at United States, Honorable Speaker, sir, United States, you are able to see two parties standing up. There are small parties, all right, but the main parties are two. We need to maybe take that route. Of course, not killing democracy, because you have to give other people the chance to form small political parties. So I support, Honorable Speaker, the funding of political parties, but there must be rules and regulations that are put in place. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Bunyasi John, member for Nambale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I'm Sakwa from Nambale, Busia County. I rise to contribute to this report. First, I want to congratulate the committee for looking at this. I think it's a good development in our country that the public sector, that the government does finance our political parties. As my colleagues have said, there is good reason. There's a public good involved in financing political parties. And the expectation is that as the political parties get funded, they'd use the monies in a way that promotes that public good. One of the areas of the public good that political parties can promote is to bring people into the mainstream of politics when they are much younger. We have affirmative actions now, and we have affirmative actions by definition because we haven't achieved some social goals that we need to achieve. So political parties can help. They help to provide training in the early years that will bring in the youth and women, the two demographic groups that are in short supply in the public space, political space. So it is indeed really a very noble goal. And I think increasingly we should move away and minimize completely reliance on foreign donors, even for seminars. You haven't got Naivasha, so you have to look around for a foreign donor to help fund this. Because of that kind of expectation in my mind, that this provision in the law can help, we have to think now about widening the scope and making it a process that allows parties that have elected officials gain some funds so they can use these monies to help train and bring our youth and women, as I said, those two groups that are underrepresented, or even provide more intensive civic education even to other candidates. I think I can say with great confidence that many times a vast majority of our people, members of parliament, get to understand the public budget-making processes and things like that only when they come to the House. And you see, the absence of that, the discourse out there is not rich enough, it's not substantive enough, it's not factual enough. So this funding of political parties, I think, is truly a great help. I am
Honorable Bunyasi, member for Nambale. Okay. I hate to interrupt you, but it is one. 1 p.m., the House must rise. So you have a balance of 7 minutes.
Thank you.
When this particular item comes back.
Thank you, Mr.
On the floor, as will be guided by the House Business Committee. For the other members who wanted to contribute, this particular item has no time limit. So when time comes, you still have an opportunity to engage and contribute to it. Honorable members, the time being 1 p.m., this House starts adjourned till today, Wednesday, 7th November 2018 at 2:30 p.m.